Michael J. Bond. With that, we constitute a quorum, and this meeting is officially called to order. First item is adoption of the agenda. Colleagues, we do have one adjustment under presentations. The administration have asked them to be here today to present to us an update of the Fulton County loss negotiations result. So we will be doing that after the Department of Finance first quarter FY23. All right, there's a motion from Shook to adopt the agenda. Is there a second? Seconded by Winston. Let's open that vote, please.
The vote is open.
And Mr. Bond, you want to be recorded as an aye on the adoption of the agenda while you get logged in? Okay.
The vote is closed.
All right, 4 yeas, 0 nays, the motion carries. The agenda is adopted. Next item is approval of the minutes. I'm sure everyone has read through them, especially Mr. Shook, who's made a motion to approve, is seconded by Winston. Let's open that vote, please.
The vote is open. The vote is closed.
Mr. Bond, I'm assuming I vote on the minutes? All right, 4 yeas, 0 nays, the motion carries. The minutes are approved. Next item up is public comment. Let's see the list here. As that populates on my screen, I'll just remind those that are signed up to speak, you have 3 minutes. You'll see a clock on the screens behind me. As that winds down to 0, I ask that you bring your comments to a conclusion. I would also say that if you have written comments and you don't get a chance to get all the way through, if you'll just leave a copy with our staff, we'll make sure all of our committee members get a copy as well. We've also been joined by Council Member Keisha Shawn Waits. All right, first up, all I see is Dewan. Is Dewan here?
He's in the hallway.
Okay. All right, well, if he comes back in, we'll just recognize it at that time. Joyce Brooks. If you'll come up to the microphone, again, you'll see a clock behind me that has your 3 minutes, and then, thanks.
Oh, well, how y'all doing today? I was just coming in today to talk about the financial part of the transportation and the homelessness. I think it's very terrible. I think that something has to be resolved about this situation. I have 6 children, and I was out on the street in Atlanta, Georgia, in the city part of Atlanta, which is supposed to be the hard part of where it all starts at, where it revives at, is down here, and I couldn't get any help, and I was left outside on the street with my children with no transportation. My car broke down, and looking for financial ways to provide for me and my children, and I haven't found anything, and this has been since 2020. That's what I wanted to share with you guys. I think that is something that should be done, especially for women and children. You know, like there's no outlet for us at all, period. And if I hadn't had any assistance with this man right here, I probably would have been left out on the streets to sleep outside with me and my children. I couldn't even get into a shelter, which I think is ridiculous. And I went back several times and told them that I had no form of transportation and nowhere to go or how to get around, and they left me outside. I think that's ridiculous. Thank you for your time.
Brooks, thank you. Is that Dewan, or if you'll go on ahead and come on up, you're up next.
Good afternoon, board.
Good afternoon.
I'm glad to see this board. This is a great finance committee. Reason why I say I'm glad to see you guys, because it's not your responsibility to understand what goes on in the community, the needs of the community. It's someone like my needs who from the community and know to bring it to you guys and see if we can get some financial help for the community. With the recent shooting at Atlantic Station, with the parents crying out for help, and we don't have any community centers that's been available for the inner city youth over there. We have the programming, and we desperately need finance to start. Mr. Alex Warren, I know you probably multitasking, you can hear me, but I just want to, you know, sometimes we got to feel that connection and make sure but the community need help. I mean, you guys seeing Atlanta going in a different direction. Since 2017, when I was at the Atlanta workforce, I left in 2017, but we were number one at the time. We did an Andy Casey study in 2015. We were number 3 in America for income inequality. We hit that in 2017. The article that's coming out worldwide now, but Atlanta has been number 1 for income inequality since 2017. Yeah, the Black Mecca, tell the 2 cities. We trending in the wrong direction. We're allowing big corporations and big money to paint the vision for Atlanta. The city don't have a vision for Atlanta. The mayor's office don't have it, city council don't have it. The big money people have it, the private funders have it, the builders have the vision. They're painting the vision, and we're letting them build skyscrapers and everything and set the price for Atlanta, just pricing everyone out. We allow, you know what I'm saying, they create gentrification. You guys don't have a vision for it. They paint the vision for Atlanta. We're allowing the money people to paint the vision for Atlanta. Park and Rec is the heartbeat for any city. And we're talking about a major black city like Atlanta that has had nothing but black leadership since 1974 with Maynard Jackson. But yet and still, we have never got Park and Rec right. And I'm not saying we need a black commission at Park and Rec. Hey, but it damn sure wouldn't hurt. We've never had one since I've been born. We gotta have somebody understand these kids, man. And not saying that a white man can't or a Jewish man can't, but we need to get somebody now that does. I'm 45 and I've never seen it. We allowed Mayor Shirley Franklin to shut down these Park and Recs. And that's when everything went spiral. And we can't keep allowing that. You guys sitting here, you seeing what's going on. We cannot keep allowing that. But the money starts right here. It's my first time coming. I'm coming every time because it starts at everything is about this. When King said, I enter my people into a burning building, it's because they left with the money, then come back, and he realized that. Auburn Avenue, I think in Atlanta at the time, it was 28 black millionaires and 23 was on Auburn Avenue, and we lost the chance to be the Black Wall Street in the 60s. You know what I'm saying? Because we went the other direction. We got to get back right. I'm about to wrap it up, Mr. Warren, but...
You're already over your time.
Okay, but we got to get this finance right in the city of Atlanta, and I thank you.
Thank you for your comments, sir.
I'm going to respect you.
Yep, thank you for your comments. Ron Shakir, you're next.
Ron Shakir, my name is Ron Shakir. Appreciate the opportunity to be able to address this city, all these elected officials. I met this young lady here as I was at a service station, and I focused on them. It was 6 of them, 6 children, beautiful children, robust children. I'm just watching them, and in my view, I see a police officer straight in front of them, maybe about 60, 70 feet. After I got finished consuming what I came there for, I walked and met and talked to them. And, but I was struck by the pleasant presence that these 5 children interacted with one another. I was impressed with the mother who did not raise her voice in profanity. She governed them while she took care of a 6-month-old child. She was a great example of a mother. After talking to her, I talked to the police. After talking to the police, I called 3 or 4 or 5 people. One is Brother Lee, who's scheduled to be here. He started making telephone calls in an organization called RAD, I believe it is. They showed up. I don't know what got them because I called 5 or 6 people to pull out whatever they can pull in. I remember this mother telling their children when they was having too much fun with one of the guardrails swinging around like just playing. And she said, look, you stop. I'm gonna tell you. And they stopped. Who was that? An auntie, an uncle, a grandmother, a grandfather? It's families that matter. And in this town right now, we spend so many hundreds of millions of dollars and not focusing on the importance of families and how stable they must be. I hope to be able to express to you some other things and concerns and some people that are gonna give me a little of their time and their mother their time. But it's time that you all today recognize that Atlanta has become a place that a mother and a father can go to an apartment complex and look in the mail and see that that apartment complex is about to close. They was all put on notice when they tore down public housing. Who does that? We was a community that public housing was a part of making Atlanta to what it was, those citizens, those mothers. I haven't met a better mother than this right here. She was tested by DFACS after she had separated from her husband. She was tested, and you know what it came up? Clean. Our citizens are clean, and we need help, and they need help. And it's all of our jobs to make sure that they get that help.
Thank you, Mr. Shakir. Appreciate your comments. Next up is Chris Brown. He left. Okay. And then Lee McGee. Lee McGee. Okay. All right. Well, then that concludes our. Mr. Shakir.
No, hold on. I signed 2 other people up, and they're here now.
That's not on the list.
Well, I did it. They saw me in here working the machine. I did it. I'm not lying, Mr. Juan.
I'm not saying you're lying. I'm just saying I'm going off of what I have in my system.
Okay.
So.
Well, Jay, could you announce his name? Jay.
We don't. So in committee, we do not have the protocol of giving people allocations of time.
Oh, no. Listen to what I'm saying.
If he would like to come up and speak for 3 minutes, he's welcome to.
Okay, this morning, I just want to make it clear. This morning, the chair that ran to other meeting that was here yesterday, Mr. Westmoreland, he said, oh, the machine. Who else spoke? I'm just saying, I was not lying.
If he would like to come up and speak, have him come up and speak then.
I give my time to my mom.
Thank you. I appreciate that, but we don't have that protocol in finance in the committee meetings. Mr. Shakir, you know the protocols here that we do.
I'm lying, sir?
No, I heard.
You done cut me off.
I did.
Do I have to talk? Can you please turn my mic on?
No, Mr. Shakir.
Okay, let me tell you that I understand that they have been able to pass their time to someone else.
They may in other committees.
You said in other committees. Okay.
They may in other committees. The protocol in the protocol in this meeting is that we do not.
You know what they did? They did something to help themselves to be down here today, Mr. Wong. And I'm asking you, could you show enough courtesy, enough humanity, that you would allow these children to call on their mother to speak a word to their concern, Mr. Wong? Would you do that?
I'll invite the second person to come up and speak. The daughter, if she signed up to, you're claiming she signed up to speak, she can come up and speak for 3 minutes. No, ma'am. Okay, so I've stated.
Wait, you mean to tell me,
Mr. Shakir,
Mr.
I understand that, Mr. Shakir. You also understand the rules of engagement in this committee room. And I appreciate, the mic is off, the microphone is off. I appreciate the remarks that you made at the beginning. They were heartfelt and received. But we're not going to break the protocols of this committee meeting for you, Mr. Shakir. We're not going to do it.
No, we're talking about black women and black men and families who are unable to be here, and she struggled to get here, and we use the concerned strategy to sign their children, who's not as comfortable. But you, Mr. Wong, is deciding to take that away from them when you could have the kindness of mind. And Mr. and other council members can allow this woman to use her creativity as a mother to address this council.
All right, we're going to move on with the agenda. Next item up is presentations. I understand from the administration that there's a request that the Fulton County loss negotiations presentation go for Mr. Shakir.
Hold on,
no, we are finished. Public comment.
Who's going to say any word to this woman not being able to allow her children to speak up? Mr. Bond, can you say anything to this matter?
And she's not even in the room. This is my committee room. I am chairing this meeting. Mr. Shakir, we are finished.
You go talk outside.
Mr. Shakir.
I don't know you. Mr. Bond, you had your hand up. Could you say anything to this matter?
Mr. Bond.
Mr. Secure, we appreciate the position that the mother is in that came down to address. I said, we appreciate the position that the young lady is in with her children to come down to address us. The committee process for the city council is the direct access for citizens to do that. However, each committee has different rules of engagement for the public. If we need to adjust those rules, you know, the Committee on Council will be the body that would consider that. We all appreciate her being here today, but the way the council committees are set up, the chair has that discretion. And so we do appreciate it, because this is not just a concern for the young lady and her children this morning. Many citizens around the city have made an issue of the timing and the way that citizens have accessed our committee system, since we do meet during the day. Many that work cannot come and attend. And so if she has concerns, I'm willing to speak with her and to come out of the meeting and talk to her. And I'm sure there are others on the committee who are willing to do as well, to help her to get her issues addressed.
All right, thank you, Mr. Bond. Thank you, Mr. Bond.
He said it's your discretion. Your discretion
This,
was
thank you,
different
Mr.
from Westmoreland discretion. So could you give respect to Councilman? I'm asking this person.
Mr. Shakir, I mean, the only thing that Mr. Bond has explained to you, and you know the rules of engagement with each committee, and you're just trying to.
You have nothing to say on
All right, we are done. Either you're going to step away, or we're going to have you removed from the room. You've got a choice.
Sir. I'm moving out this room.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Shakir.
But
Miss.
your leadership shows a poor discretion when a family of man, a woman of 6, and you allow that to happen.
All right, Mr. Donald, you get to follow that.
No, I need to follow you, sir. That, you to that. Whatever you.
Happy Wednesday. All right, we do, colleagues, you have a copy of the presentation.
Actually, we're able to resolve his inquiry by connecting him with Atlanta Housing and some of our partners at MARTA. So we've got some folks outside resolving that now.
Thank you, Mr. Donald.
All right. Well, thank you for having me today. Wanted to give you an update as requested by the chair on local option sales tax, which we have positively rectified for the city of Atlanta and Fulton County. Today, I'll quickly go over a few things for both the edification of the public as well as for our committee, highlighting about 3 areas. One is an overview of local option sales tax. I know you guys are very familiar with that, but giving some insight to the public. Secondly, just a summary of the 10-year period that we're in now. And then thirdly, a summary of our projected results of the pending 10-year local option sales tax period. So to just start off, local option sales tax is something that is coordinated at the county level, put in approximately, I guess, 25, 30 years ago. So this is our, or will be our 4th iteration of local option sales tax. 1% tax used to pay for the maintenance and operational expenses that would normally be paid through property tax revenue. So maintaining loss for Fulton County and really around the state is a very important endeavor, because it allows us to deliver excellent services without doing it on the backs of our residents. Because one thing that most people don't know is somewhere in between 40 and 51% of all local option sales tax is provided by commuters, folks coming in and out of the county, and specifically Atlanta, which is the biggest draw. It means that folks who are visiting our fair city are actually paying into local option sales tax at a much higher rate than our residents. So we get to provide all of these services and these benefits on the backs of others versus our residents. Really quickly, the state law for loss provisions is really what governs how we collect as well as how we negotiate local option sales tax. I'm sure that Council Member or Chairman Wan asked for this presentation because there was a lot in the news that highlighted that we were very much on the cusp of losing local option sales tax in Fulton County, because the county can actually decide to do one of 2 things. One is local option sales tax, which benefits us. I think I highlighted that because about 50% of those funds are delivered by extra external folks, or you can do a host. And while a host has some benefits, not as much for local municipalities. And so what is required is that 50% plus one execute a certificate to keep LOST in place. That means Atlanta, as well as one additional member cities. I'll get to it later, but for us, we actually have a unanimous, all 15 cities have committed and rectified this, which I think is something that is very unique and a big benefit for the city. I think one other piece is that there are actually two pools within LOST. One is the county level, where the county gets a direct share, and then a municipal pool for which is shared amongst the 15 cities. Summary of what has happened over the last 10 years. The 10-year period actually runs from 2013 until December 31st of this year, 2022, and currently the city of Atlanta is collecting a 40.436% piece of the municipal pool. That is important because our total population of the pool is actually around a little under 43%. And so at no time since the incorporation, we'll call it the cityhood movement that has occurred over the last 15 to 20 years, has Atlanta ever really gotten close to its population share, which has actually changed this time around under this mayor. The city, through this 10-year period that we're currently in, is projected to collect about $1.18 billion in lost proceeds over this period. What you'll see is that those numbers have really skyrocketed over the last few years as the economy, inflation, and other things have occurred. And I say that not just kind of slipping in a piece about inflation. In this instance for us, inflation is actually a good thing because it impacts the numbers that we collect through our sales tax. In addition to that, our lost collections for 2022, which is really what we would consider our benchmark years, around a little under 145 million annually, which we kind of look at moving forward is kind of where our base will be. What is really important for this body to understand is that it is imperative that we keep LOST in place, not only for this 10-year period, but really forevermore. And so we'll be looking at that in the legislature on how we do that, because for us, other cities is even more, but for us it's 20% of the general fund budget, which really impacts our ability to deliver services. That's even more important because over the time frame of this next 10-year period, we simply have a much better deal than we have had before. So I'll give you a little bit of history and then I'll speed on into where we are today. Previously, 14 cities, not 15, because there was no city of South Fulton. What is also important for both you and the public to know, Fulton County holds all of the negotiating power when it comes to the LOST agreement. They can decide to not commit to the agreement that we put in place. Now they have to because we've got an agreement in place, but going into negotiations, Fulton County wanted about 35% of all LOST collections. That would be the highest that they had ever received prior to the cityhood movement, and so there was no way in, I'm sorry, I forgot I'm being recorded. I would say something different, but no way we're gonna allow that to happen under this mayor. And so what we did is use the previous as a baseline. The county received 15% of all LOST collections previous to the incorporation of South Fulton, which provided an 85% pool for the other municipalities to split. Again, the city of Atlanta received 40% of that. 2017, the city of South Fulton comes into play, and what the legislature did, make sure I got this, what the legislature did was actually take directly off the top of the county about 10%, allocate that to the city of South Fulton. I think their exact number was around 9.02%, and added that to the municipal pool. And so now going into these negotiations, we had an additional city, so it was very important that we renegotiate the entire pool. One thing for you to look at that, again, I think is very important is the trends of the 10-year collections. when you look, you'll see that in 2019, there was actually a slight dip in the growth, but not in the collections, but just in the amount of growth. In 2020, with the pandemic, there was a severe dip in overall collections, but one thing that is very key is that Atlanta's collections, to a certain extent, remain stable. That's because we're the driver, and we also have the largest portion outside of the county of total collections across all 15 municipalities. What is also important to look at is when you look at the county's total collections, their dip from 15% down to 5% really reduces the amount that they collect and also has a negative impact in services. Finally, I'll just give you a quick look here. We'll just look at the bottom line. What you'll see is these are all growth numbers in that annual percentage, and you will see that the growth rate overall, with the exception of 2020, was always a positive growth rate, and on average it's about 5%. And so that means each year above the previous year, lost collections come in at about 5% more than they did the previous year. That's the average. Of course, there are some nuances throughout the process. That's important for us because we wanted to make sure we came to an agreement with the county that was fair and equitable. And to do that, we first had to make some assumptions. For us, our first assumption is that we were going to use a baseline of saying worst case scenario versus best case. So we used a 3% baseline, which is less than what we had over this 10-year period, which we know will end up being better, so that if we come to an agreement, we all know we're going to collect much more money than the assumptions that we put in place. I think the Dickens administration, under the leadership of our mayor, wanted to also make sure that the agreement was not only fair and equitable for the city of Atlanta, but also for all other member cities. That's important because the city of Atlanta, again, has never really received its population share, and many of the other cities also contributed to the smaller cities like East Point, College Park, and some of the others, kind of filling in the gaps to them so they could benefit. And so we wanted to make sure to write that, correct it to where the city of Atlanta gets closer to its municipal share, and also ensure that we lessen the burden on our residents when it comes to residential taxes by increasing our lost collections. What you will see from this agreement is that, again, I talked to you about the current prevailing model. If you look at the data that I showed you earlier, about 5% of that, or 5% is actually what we'll call a realistic number. We used the 3.3%. And we also wanted to make sure that the pool of 85% was a little bit larger so that we all have additional resources, even with the inclusion of South Fulton, which, again, by default, you would think would lessen our collections. So we utilized that 3.3% projection model, got the county to agree to it, and based on the projections that we have, there is 40% in additional revenues that are in the overall pool for us to split. With that being the case, in this conservative model, there's about $3.85 billion available over the 10-year period for us to split. So I'll skip past the boring stuff and hop right into where we are right now. So I've kind of gone over this slide, but again, the 40% is very important, and also the fact that we used an extremely conservative growth rate. Secondly, just included some details for you to look at later on, which shows that when you see we've actually used a growth rate percentage of 3%, the reason it adds up to 3.3 is if you look at 2023, it says 6%. That's to account for the growth from this year. So give you a little backroom information there. And so you can see that the projected growth is much higher for everyone. This slide just goes into more detail on that, and so does this one. So I'll just kind of close out so we have some time for questions. Really quickly, this is likely the best deal that the city of Atlanta and really all of the municipal partners have ever had. One, we will collect, the city of Atlanta, $1.487 billion over this 10-year period in a very conservative model. Remember, our model includes the almost 10% negative growth of the pandemic. So we expect to collect a ton more money, almost $370 million more in this 10-year period than the other one. That's almost 40%. We also will be collecting 42.96% of the total municipal share, which is slightly under our 43%, which again is the highest since the incorporation movement of cities. And all of our municipal partners have been made whole. And so this is very important for the city of Atlanta because it equates to an additional $4 to $6 million year after year. So, Chairman, that concludes my report. And of course, I'll take any questions that you might have.
Questions or comments from my colleagues? All right, Mr. Winston, Mr. Shook, followed by Mr. Winston.
All right, thank you. This information's much appreciated.
Yes, sir.
So, over the next 10 years, the odds are, 110% we're going to have a recession. We may be on the cusp of one now.
That's right.
Did you account for that probability by using the conservative figuring?
That's exactly right. Yes, sir. So the conservative figure, so the last 10-year period, even with a recession and a poor economy, as well as a once-in-a-lifetime global catastrophe, still resulted in 5% growth, and we used a baseline of 3%. So even if we had a full 10 years of less than positive results, this is the worst case scenario. So we expect to receive and incur quite a bit more in revenue than we have here.
Winston.
Thank you, Mr. Donald. Is it fair to draw a correlation between months that we saw increased lost revenue and tie that to events in the city?
So I'd say yes, but not fully, because lost collections are countywide. So some of that has to do with everything from the summer travel schedule versus the festival schedule to winter vacations and things of that nature. So local option sales tax really varies not only by events, but even commuter travel as well.
Okay. Yeah, and I brought that question up because I know that we're going to host the NCAA College Football Championship. We're looking at we have FIFA coming, so
you'll see those numbers skyrocket. So if that's what you're asking, absolutely. So in general, you'll see local option sales tax will always fluctuate, and mostly it'll go positive based on what type of activities and what the season is. But when you have those once-in-a-lifetime events like FIFA, just like in the 1996 Olympics and things of that nature, those numbers will go through the roof. Again, that's why I said these numbers are ridiculously conservative because we overestimated expenses, underestimated our revenues.
And I bring that up too because you have people that grumble when we go out and we try to pitch for events, but
right.
There's a direct correlation between us seeing lost revenue increasing when we have those events. I see that as a positive.
Oh, absolutely. I'll tell you, like I said, 40% at minimum. And so in Atlanta, it's closer to about 51% of those lost revenues are actually paid by folks who do not live in Atlanta. For our residents, that is a humongous boom because that means in lieu of their property taxes increasing or adjustments like that, they're actually carried by law. So there is a direct correlation to that.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments? Yeah, Mr. Dozier, and then I've got a couple.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Donald.
Sure.
I am curious with that 3% conservative estimate, if we do see more of a windfall as part of these events that are coming, what is the protocol typically? Maybe this is more of a question for CFO and others, but when we have more revenues than when we expect, does that end up back into the reserves or?
I'll hop in on this for one thing because these are actually projections. So you don't collect on these projections separately. The CFO and his team will actually do their annual projections considering some of these things, but they would actually use the real. So when we get into FY24, they use the 6 to 9 months previous to help do their collection. So it'd be a more trued up model. So we wouldn't have to adjust there. This just actually gives us a baseline to project what that 20% of loss does for the next 10 years. And then they use real numbers over a course of time to follow up.
Thank you.
Know a little bit about finance. You can ask me.
Appreciate you.
So you started answering one of the questions I had, the mechanism by which this all works. These are sales tax dollars that are collected and and received by the county, who then allocates it out based on the schedule that's
Correct.
provided.
And it's
right?
really the Department of Revenue is the actually clearinghouse for these funds.
So at the state?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so there's a portion when we make a purchase at a retail place that is
right.
considered the county sales tax, the lost, and it goes to the state, and then they, based on these formulas, pay us back
In
out.
general, yes, sir.
Okay. And then if I'm understanding correctly, the next 10-year schedule, it just varies from year to year versus a set number for
That
each
is
year.
correct, and I'm sorry, I didn't go over that in detail, and I probably should have. So in the previous time frame, I think I mentioned that there was a straight line, so Fulton County got 15% off the top. What we did this time to ensure that there was more in the pool is we actually started them at 5%, and then we ramped them up to 12.5. So in no year do they receive more than 12.5%. That's also, I think, Councilmember Shook asked about us trying to figure out what the recession looks like. Well, if we're in one now or entering into one, Fulton County's share only increases once we go into the years that we project to be positive. So that takes that into account. So their net collection has gone from 14.97% down to 10% net collection over the next 10 years, which is why it's such a good deal for Atlanta.
Yeah, that's helpful. I was looking at that and just trying to.
Yeah, that's what it is.
Whoever came up with that schedule, they earned their dollar.
Listen, we've got a great mayor.
All right, any other questions for Mr. Donald? All right, thank you so much
Thank
for
you, I
being here
appreciate
to present this. All right, next up, we have the Finance Department, who's going to walk us through the fiscal year 2023 first quarter update. We also have a presentation for that. Colleagues, you have a copy at your stations. CFO Bala.
Yes. Good morning. Good afternoon, council members. Mohammed Bala, Chief Financial Officer. Someone have the clicker? Good afternoon. Today we will be discussing the first quarter results for fiscal year 23. This is the period of time covering July 1st through September 30th of this fiscal year. Dr. Wilson will be leading a presentation for the quarterly, but before we enter into the quarterly, while we are closing out the fiscal year 2022 actuals, we do have some indication that I wanted to share that the results, preliminary results for fiscal year 22 are much better than expected. In fact, this slide here represents what our projected fund balance is going to be. We will have another update to council in more detail once the audited financials are complete. But from a preliminary perspective right now, we are expecting the city's fund balance to be at $235 million, which is the highest fund balance the city has ever had from both a nominal amount and as a percent of the adopted budget. So we are happy about that opportunity. That was driven primarily by better than expected sales tax revenues, as well as collection of previous year business license revenues that really drove that number up. And we'll continue to have further discussions into the FY23 budget development, 24 budget development process as that starts in the early part of the next year. Having said that, I'll take it over to Dr. Wilson.
Good afternoon. Tina Wilson, Deputy CFO. We want to give you a quick update on the first quarter of 2023. We're going to cover the time period of July through September 2022, provide a summary analysis of the City of Atlanta's budget to actual performance, and also forecast and project out the remainder of the year, including any identified or significant issues that we have foreseen that will be coming down the pipeline. So we'll jump right in. Our slide here is basically a one-pager of the summary on revenue and expenses. And again, we took a pretty conservative approach to this exercise for a couple of reasons. One, we're still in first quarter, still have a ways to go. We know that there are inflationary pressures and potential recession on the horizon. With that being said, property tax and local option sales tax at this time are on track to meet our forecast. We don't see a need at this point to make any adjustments there in the projections. We do have two highly sensitive COVID-impacted revenue categories that remain, which were alcoholic beverage taxes and hotel motel taxes. These were the ones we saw dip quite a bit during COVID, but during this year, we expect those to come back fully to pre-COVID levels. Fines and penalties also were impacted by COVID. They're a little bit sluggish still in our projections. We believe it's due to just the cycle of court cases, courts reopening and processing through cases. So we'll monitor that to see how those revenues start to come in. So as of the first quarter, the year-end projected revenue surplus is $5.9 million, or 0.8% of the operating revenue budget. On the expense side, we have four main expense categories that are at risk of ending the year over budget, mainly in personnel and employee benefits, and driven a lot by overtime and COVID comp time. Purchase contract services, supplies, capital outlays. There is a slight projected surplus in other costs, mainly due to the carry forward true-up entry. So as of the first quarter, the year-end projected expense overrun associated with these risks is $13.7 million, or 1.8% of the operating expense budget. So the net effect of that, early on, the estimated year-end deficit is about $7.8 million. I'm going to turn it over now to our revenue chief to go through some details in the on the revenue side.
Good afternoon, council members. Lawrence Davis Jr., Revenue Chief for the Office of Revenue. I'd like to go ahead and draw your attention to the bottom portion of the chart labeled FY23 funded budget. In this column, you will see that the total general fund budget is $779.9 million, which includes $1.3 million in committed funds balance from the building permit funds and $19.3 million from the uncommitted funds. Minus these fund balance transfers, the operating budget, as you can see on the labeled subtotal on the chart, is $759.2 million. In the next column that you have the FY23 actuals, our actuals were $104.7 million, which represents 13.4% of the total budget and 13.8% of the operating budget. Our revenue projections for the remaining 9 months of the fiscal year is at $660.4 million, resulting in a year-end operating forecast of $765.1 million, thereby giving us roughly about a 1% increase, or $5.9 million, as described by Dr. Wilson earlier, of the operating budget of $759.2 million. I would also like to draw your attention at this time to the two largest revenue categories on the chart, property tax and local option sales tax. As stated earlier, we are anticipating both revenue categories to remain on track to meet this year-end fiscal forecast. As stated, also we took a conservative forecasting approach, and it was based off of the uncertainties of a recession at the beginning of 2023. Despite that threat, we are going to continue to forecast. Our forecasting team is going to continue to observe monthly the economic trends and make any appropriate forecast revisions regarding these two categories. As for our year-end projection of $5.9 million above the operating budget, this is primarily the results of an extraordinary collectible first quarter in several of our top revenue categories that contribute to the general fund. Leading the way as a major contributor to the budget is indirect cost revenue, as you can see on the chart. This revenue category is projected to surpass the budget amount by $4.6 million as a result from changes in the annual indirect cost plan, which was completed in September of this year. And just as a FYI for the council's knowledge, the indirect cost revenues for this fiscal year represents the increase in expenses activities from FY21. There is a 2-year lag. Our second revenue contributor is the public utilities, alcohol, beverage, and other taxes, which is projected to exceed the budget by $511,000 and is primarily due to the increase in revenue from the tax ad valorem taxes and the railroad ad valorem taxes. Our third contributor to the budget is license and permits. This is projected to exceed the budget amount by $287,000 based on results of continuous revenues collections from prior year business licenses. Our fourth major contributor is other revenues. We are projecting this category to exceed the budget by $278,000 and is primarily due to unanticipated revenues from a federal subsidy reimbursing the city for debt services paid using to develop the public safety facility on Pryor Street. Our fifth revenue contributor is charges for services, which is projected to exceed the budget amount by $268,000 and is primarily due to increased revenue from the police false alarm fees. And our final contributor to the general fund budget is hotel motel, which is projected to be on track with the budget amount of $22.1 million at fiscal year end. We are seeing that the hotel motel revenue is continuing to experience a gradual rebound from the impact of the pandemic. And we have, in our observation, we're especially seeing this on the business travel side of the industry, in which there's a more popularity of hybrid and virtual conference environment. In conclusion, although current trends in each revenue category as of the first quarter are favorable to the city, we are still seeing the uncertainty of a recession for the beginning of the year. Thus, our forecasting and analysis team, it will continually to monitor the trends and the revenue for each revenue category for potential impacts due to the changes in the economy. I will yield now in this presentation to the Budget Chief, Charles Bell, for his presentation.
Good afternoon. I'm happy to have the opportunity to present to you. I am Charles Bell, Budget Chief in the Office of Budget and Fiscal Policy in the Department of Finance, and going to talk to you about expenses over the next 4 slides. We're going to begin with the discussion on expenses by major account group category. I do want to reiterate the fact that the funded budget at this particular point in time is $779.85 million. The table shows 3 months of expenses, second numerical column there at $199 million, which is 26% of the $779.85 million. This coincidentally is within a percent of a straight line basis, that being 25%. Our early look ahead for the remainder of the year is $594.6 million. And so adding that to the previous number of $199 million would get us to a year-end finish of $793.6 million. This indicates a deficit forecast of $13.7 million at year-end, pitting us at about 1.8% beyond budget. Now, as we look at the forecasted year-end expenses by major category, We see the notes to the right portion of the slide, however, not to be confused with the total percent of the $13.7 million. I would like to offer you this. Personnel forecast a deficit of $9.2 million. That is 67.2% of the total $13.7 million forecasted deficit. Purchase contract services forecast a deficit of $1.6 million, and that's 11.5% of the $13.7 million deficit. Supplies forecasting out a deficit of $2 million is 14.7% of that forecasted deficit. And capital outlays forecast a deficit of $1.8 million, and that's at about 13.4% of the total. Now, basically, these four categories forecast, the total of the four categories drive a year-end forecasted position adding up to 107%. The 7% offset is basically attributable to the $1.3 million underrun that you'll see there in the category listed as other costs. This is principally attributable to the City Council's contingency and City Council expense accounts at $1.1 million and $323,000 respectively. Now, as we go back and again, looking at the information there on the right side, personnel, we're looking at about a $9.2 million forecasted deficit. Key components of that would be overtime. We have a heavy concentration in fire at about an estimate of $1.9 million, corrections at $434,000, parks at $714,000, and the Department of Transportation at $1.9 million. We also have comp time COVID-19 costs, which will impact the financial performance with about a $4.4 million piece of unbudgeted costs, primarily with $3.3 million in police, $677,000 in fire, parks at $255,000, and corrections at $170,000. Salaries regular as well as sworn, deficit balances most heavily impacted by executive offices at $2.8 million, fire at $1.2 million, parks at $3.6 million, and these are offset by City Council with underruns of $1.4 million and police at $2.4 million. Turning our attention down a little further, we look at extra help. We're looking at police contributing to the deficit at $549,000, corrections at $827,000, finance at $234,000, and parks at $893,000. Now, group health is spread throughout, and we aggressively budgeted for group health this year as actuals exceeded budget in the past. So an early review looks as if we will have a savings in this year. It is still early, as Dr. Wilson mentioned, but we think we've done well. It's a particular interest to the departments because in the past where we may have under budgeted, it kind of was a drag on their budgets in the past, but we think we've taken care of that. Also, as we look at workers' compensation, it too looks like it will be an underrun, and that is a trend that we see in police. The next category is purchase contract services, deficit of $1.6 million forecasted. We've got four items there that we would point to. If you remember a little bit more, right at 2 months ago, you all passed legislation as the city began to enter into a new time clock system. That was an $863,000 piece. Law has its anticipated litigation volumes at a little over $1.5 million. AIM, telecommunication expense, AIM has stepped forward this year to assist 311 in its technology upgrade, and that touched them for about $1 million, which was unanticipated. And then, of course, dealing with police, the camera system maintenance. If you'll remember, the Police Foundation came forward with some cameras in the past, and after a little time passes, then the handoff is fully made to police. Police will begin its maintenance, and we're looking at about $1.6 million. So So that takes care of purchase contract services. The next category would be supplies. We're forecasting a deficit there of $2 million. This principally comes from police and its consumable trackable supply account. And basically here we're talking about ammunition. We also have some items such as equipment, smaller pieces that range in the account group between $1,000 and $5,000. And then of course uniforms. As we look at these three accounts, during the first 3 months, we've already amassed a $975,000 deficit. Interfund and interdepartmental charges shows a year-end overrun of $775,000. The acquisition of new police vehicles we anticipate will bring the overrun down with fewer repair jobs required, new vehicles obviously, and as fleet begins to fill some of its key vacancies, they will also be able to better manage the cost allocations. Debt and other financing uses are basically nil, and so having said that, I'd like to advance this slide to the slide where we look at departmental performances. You'll see the departments listed in a few years immediately past. We talk about the general fund in terms of 23 departments. Now we're up to 24 as DPW has gotten back into the game on the general fund side, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in just a moment. But again, you'll see the year-end forecast with a deficit of $7 million. I should say, actually, $13.7 million as you look there in the next to the last column listed. You'll see there to the right, we list about 5 departments. We're showing police at $5.6 million, and a lot of that had to do with the purchase of vehicles and the camera maintenance, which we just spoke about. Parks, $3.6 million in terms of a deficit, looking at its salary accounts trending well beyond budget. Fire, $2.3 million. Sworn salaries and overtime accounts at $1.5 million over in sworn salaries in the first quarter. AIM, information management, we're looking at about a $1.8 million forecasted deficit. We're looking at salaries there, and of course we talked already about the $1 million that they stepped forward to help out with the 311 technology enhancements. Law department, again, we're talking about outside counsel forecast of $1.7 million. Planning, $1.17 million, where we're dealing with salaries, extra help, and group health. And then the Department of Transportation, and these last two, I'm just bringing information to you because we get close to either just above the $1 million mark or just under $1 million. So we just talked about planning at $1.17 million, and then ADOT at $866,000, dealing in personnel as it deals with overtime and comp time COVID, partially offset with some of its salaries and the group health account, which I spoke about earlier. As we go to the next segment of the presentation, we talk about our enterprise funds. And here we're basically talking about aviation, watershed, and solid waste. As we look at aviation, we're looking at a budget of $523.6 million. Positive margins of $34.7 million through the first quarter for aviation. Revenues and expenses are expected to climb $407.3 million and $378.3 million respectively for the remainder of the year. Aviation anticipates an underrun in expenses of about $63.7 million. A remaining piece of that comes down to viewing reserves at 43.8. Watershed's budget, $623 million. There's a first quarter deficit of 39.7. They got out of the gate just a little slow. Expenses exceed revenue, $219.7 million over the $180 million tag that you see there on the slide. Revenues are expected to exceed expenses for the remainder of the year by $141 million for an anticipated year-end finish of $101.3 million, a positive margin there. Revenue collections are expected to exceed budget by $17.9 million, and expenses are projected to underrun budget at about $50.5 million, and with a reserve balance of $32.9 million. Now, I failed to state earlier to try to focus your attention. At the bottom of the slide, you've got 3 boxes, one for aviation, which we've kind of already gone past. The second box there talks about watershed, and I do want to say that $83.4 million of the expenses there looks like an underrun forecast. It does sound an alarm to some degree, but we must point out that $75.8 million of that is actually a combination of the 3 reserve accounts. And so you'll see there in that box below, the first piece of the reserve is $32.9 million. Fund balance reserve, bad debt reserves, you're looking there at about $23.3 million. Bad debt reserves are strategically placed based on the history of poor customer payment. And then the last reserve, GEFA being Georgia Environmental Finance Authority, it definitely has a situation where it deals with debt, and our debt treasury division in finance works with Watershed to make certain that we stay in compliance. So Watershed basically goes to a 95% funding level, covering accounts that are outstanding beyond 45 days. And so working with our debt treasury division, they keep everything intact. Lastly, we talk about solid waste services, $60.77 million. Revenues exceed expenses by $7.6 million through the first quarter. However, expenses are projected to exceed revenue for the remainder of the year, $38.4 million over $34.6 million, the difference being 3.9. And when pitting this $3.9 million deficit against a first quarter margin of about $7.6 million, we anticipate solid waste to finish the year at a positive $3.76 million. Now, from here, we want to expand our look at DPW/solid waste. So as we go to another slide that we have prepared for you, kind of want to look at this, taking a deeper dive. DPW, this slide we could refer to as a DPW slide in sources and uses. Now, as we look at public works, meaning DPW and solid waste, as a whole, the city, through the passing of legislation 22 Ordinance 1281, I'll read to you an excerpt of the caption of that particular piece. It was an ordinance to adjust the taxes, assessments, service fees, and charges for solid waste services specified, including funding, street-based sanitary services. The ordinance resulted in a $20 million anticipation level for DPW in the general fund, and as I mentioned to you earlier, DPW is now going to get back a little bit into the general fund side of the house. So they'll have businesses on both the general fund side as well as the enterprise fund side. And the general fund, it will be that $20 million piece, and I think you can see that on the slide. There at the top left there, you'll see the $20 million listed as revenue anticipated for DPW. This goes along with the $60.8 million for FY23 solid waste budget. And as you look to see the breakdown there on the left side, you'll see personnel leading the way with about $35.5 million, representing 58.5% of the $60.8 million. On the projections side, to the right side of the slide, we do forecast 136,813 as an overrun with respect to the $20 million. So as you see that piece there, I guess about 4 lines down to the right, you'll see that 136,000. DPW has an unexpected expense, has already incurred an unexpected expense as they donated monies to Live Thrive and also to the tuition reimbursement program. Both have been passed, obviously, by City Council, and as that has been taken into account, it's been included in the forecast. As illustrated in the previous slide, we projected $4.94 million underrun in expenses. Hence, we show the $55,831,000 as the forecast, which adds to the $20.1 million for a total projection of $75,968,000. And you can see that kind of coming down the middle of the slide to the right. You'll see that in bold. And we just wanted to highlight that. The variances are listed all the way there to the far right, and you'll see the deficit of $1.17 million at the top right there, plus the $4.8 million budget underrun, which gets us to the $3,625,000, and that gives you what we hope is a clearer picture, a deeper dive of DPW combined with solid waste. Before I turn it over to our debt chief, Courtney Knight, I'd be happy to try to answer any questions that you have. Okay, all right. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chairman Wan, members of the committee. I'm Courtney Knight, Chief of Treasury Debt and Investments. I want to talk with you for a few minutes about what we've been experiencing on the investment side, as well as what we've been seeing on the debt side of our portfolios. First of all, what you see here is we manage internally about $2.3 billion of cash on a daily basis. Our investment activities are controlled by the city's investment policies as well as state statutes. And those policies basically lead us to manage our money in a very conservative way, where we are primarily responsible for preserving capital, that is safety, making sure that we have sufficient funds on a daily basis to meet our obligations, and lastly, to earn yield. That leads us to a portfolio that consists largely of U.S. Treasury securities, federal agency securities, some municipal bonds, and an investment in Georgia Fund 1. I've been talking to you for most of this year about what we've all been experiencing in the market, which is a high degree of volatility and rapidly rising interest rates. If you look to the right on this slide, you'll see how that has impacted our investment returns. Back in fiscal year 21, the average yield on our portfolio was just over 1%. In 22, it had dropped to 0.8%. And thus far this year, we're looking at almost 2.2% in yields on our investments. And we expect that to continue through most of the next year. That's the good news. The bad news is over on the debt portfolio. So we have approximately $6.7 billion of debt allocated between several portfolios, our general obligation bonds, general fund and other debt, the TADs, the airport debt, and watershed debt. What has happened as interest rates have risen is we've lost opportunities to refinance debt, to save by refinancing debt at lower interest rates. We were able to successfully refinance 500 million bonds at the airport earlier this year. It generated almost $30 million of savings. But today, the opportunities to continue to refinance debt at the airport and at Watershed just do not exist. So we continue to monitor market conditions and continue to evaluate creative refinancing opportunities so that should interest rates start to decline, we'll look at ways to refinance debt and always lower our interest cost. What you see is that we have no variable rate debt. That's good news because as interest rates rise, we don't suffer from any rising interest rates. We have paid off a substantial chunk of watershed debt over the year, almost $110 million, and we've not issued any new debt in the watershed portfolio. We did issue $500 million of new bonds for aviation, and of course, we completed the general obligation infrastructure bond sale earlier this month. The last thing that I'll relate for you all is our bond rating. So throughout this season, we've had meetings with the rating agencies, Standard & Poor's, Moody's, and Fitch. We've been able to confirm our AA+, AA1 ratings on the general obligation portfolio. That rating has moved to stable. That's good news. We've also recently confirmed our ratings at Watershed and at the airport. I'll mention that the rating agencies applaud the city for our strong financial management, our conservative approach to financing, and that keeps us in good stead with the rating agencies. I'll be happy to answer any questions y'all may have.
All right, colleagues, questions for any sections of the presentation? And I also want to acknowledge we've been joined by Councilmember Liliana Bakhtiari. All right, well, I have a question about, and then I'll go to Mr. Shook. In terms of this will be on the expenditure side, specifically around personnel, services, and employee benefits. So it makes sense to me, if you'll come on up, it makes sense to me that we're projecting to go above budget in terms of overtime, comp time, extra help, contract services because of our vacancies. I mean, that seems to be a recurring theme of department commissioners when they come up. My question is then, how are I don't want to call them savings, but the unused budget from the vacant positions, in some departments it's anywhere from 25 to 30%. How is that rolled back into the budget projection?
Okay, in many instances, and because we too in finance, particularly in budget, are getting questions, we have a system which I'm sure you all are familiar about, request to fill positions, managed by a vacancy review board. We go through a process where we put in the request, chart it out through the remainder of the year, and see how that impacts the existing budget. Oftentimes, we figure that it will go beyond the budget, and we'll submit information letting the powers that be that know that. However, there are many instances that are deemed critical, and we have to go ahead and put the new positions, the new requests, I should say, not positions, but the new requests into play. Many of those are extra help. In some cases, they are even backfill for separations from the city, whether it be terminations, retirements, or just people moving on to other jobs. But what happens is that for those positions that have been deemed critical, they are into the payroll. And so what that does is it puts us in a position where positions are being in play without having the original budget appropriations. And so quite often that's what you'll see. I know, and I'm guessing, Chairman Warren, that you're wondering, you know, what's happening, because we think we got savings, but some of those savings are being eaten up because we had critical positions activity that we needed to fill. I hope that answers your question.
See Dr. Wilson jump in. Do you have more context to add?
I would just add that one of the things that we're seeing across the city is a challenge in the employee market. So to Mr. Bell's point, a backfill may not get backfilled at the same salary. So that ends up cannibalizing a little bit of that salary savings that you would have anticipated.
Okay.
One additional point, Councilmember, in some of the vacancy reports that you see, it also depends on how they're highlighting and showing vacancies. In the cities, we have vacancies that are funded and we have vacancies that are unfunded. So you might see a vacancy report that shows that might show 20 vacant positions for 100 authorized positions, But going into the budget season, only 10 of those positions would have been funded. So we're not funding all vacancies.
Okay, I'll continue kind of noodling on that. The other question I have is around non-departmental. I know that y'all, if I read this correctly, we're projected now to be over budget by $775,000. Is that factoring in, I know the settlements, the significant settlements that we authorized, all are coming out of non-departmental, correct? So I guess, is that being factored into our projections? And who's kind of watching that balance as we continue to charge things to it?
Yeah. So we work closely with the law department budget team, Dr. Wilson and Mayshire Bailey over at the law department. We have touch points to kind of have a good look ahead. They've been extremely diligent about their expectations for the year, and so those have been factored in now to the best extent possible. But of course, with legal and settlements, it's they can pop up sometimes unexpectedly. But we do have great visibility and great coordination with the law department.
Thank you. And my final question has to do with the solid waste underrun in terms of revenue projections. So wasn't the budget we approved based on the new rates that we adopted earlier this year? So why are we already, after one quarter, missing the target numbers on that in terms of the revenue side?
I think the portion that we'll have to discuss with solid waste is solid waste went from a structure that was solely dependent on revenues that were coming from ratepayers. We've now went to a model that has both a general fund portion and a billing portion. So in the past, solid waste now sees roughly $80 million of total anticipations that come into their system, where in the past that was roughly about 70 million or so, 72 million. So they are seeing more money. What we're seeing is early indications of the bills that went out on that 60 million and the collections that have come in so far. It is a conservative estimate. We don't want to, we're bracing ourselves that we might not hit that target. But I know there was also a lot of questions about solid waste billings that went out. People getting comfortable with the new layout. There were some questions before people submitted their payments. So in the next quarter, we'll have much better visibility, but we were taking a conservative approach on projections now.
So if I hear you correctly, part of it is collections. Part of it also is just corrections potentially, like the questions that have come in about, and then adjustments that are made to correct. Okay. All right. Thank you. Mr. Shook, you have the floor.
Who does y'all's economic forecasting? Is that in-house? Is that under contract, a blend? How does that happen?
For the last two budget cycles, the economic projections were aided by the help of Deloitte Consulting to help us do our revenue models. We've utilized their expertise specifically on some of the macro trends and some of the impacts of COVID. We are having conversations now to see if we still need outside support going into FY24's budget development, but we do certainly have capabilities and tools in-house with the MuniCap model internally that we can utilize to help us move forward if need be.
How does their work benchmark against ensuing reality?
It worked out really well. We were pleased with the work that they've done the last couple of cycles. I think they've helped us considerably.
If I could just add, I think we've been pretty pleased with the work that they've done. They've probably been more conservative than we have been.
Oh,
and
I didn't know that was feasible.
And our actual revenues have outperformed some of the estimates that they have provided for us. But there was just so much uncertainty around COVID and what would be impacted, how long it would be impacted over the last couple of years. So.
All right, and then I've got a generic question, I'm going to poach on Mr. Wan's favorite topic, which is vacancies. So I've been at this for a minute, and when I see every year certain departments or key activities within those departments consistently at a 20% vacancy rate, and I mean 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, what is the finance department's belief that that's going to change? Because it'll be the same next year.
Right. I think from a finance department's perspective is coordinating well with the user agencies as well as Department of HR to realistically assess how much of those vacancies need to be funded on an annual basis. And we're trying to use historical attrition, onboarding timelines to guide us in that process of where the vacancy budgets should be set. We are having deeper conversations with the Department of HR just in general about should some of those vacancies be abolished once and if need be recreated in other personnel papers. That is high on Commissioner Smith's radar right now, and she's in fact having a team looking into the duration of those vacancies and if it makes feasible sense to continue carrying vacancies for an extended period of time.
That's just what we heard last year. I guess if you say it enough, it becomes rote.
But the other aspect that we have done, and you should have seen different in the last couple of years, is the number of vacancies that were funded. So we went from fully funding vacancies 3-4 years ago to partially funding them now.
So I guess what raises my eyebrow or in a whole different way is when during budget season, commissioners get up there and brag about how their agency has received national accreditation with 20% vacancies every year. It doesn't add up, but I'll let Mr. Wan take that up later. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shook. We got Mr. Winston and then Mr. Bond.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I did want to kind of piggyback off of Councilmember Shook's question around projections and benchmarking for the revenue. So first quarter actuals, 104.7 million, which represents 13.4%, which is about a 9% deficit if you look at it from a quarterly basis. However, projections are expected to be 1% above the FY23 for the entire operational budget. So obviously I understand that there are trends and benchmarks that you have in those projections. For instance, property taxes will come in at a certain time. But, right, you're saying that public utility, alcohol, beverage, and those projections are trending ahead of where they should be for those projections. It would be helpful to kind of see, I guess, trends or benchmarks that kind of show us what quarters we should expect those numbers to come in so that we know if there was any red flags in those subsequent quarters to know that, hey, we may not meet those numbers.
And we're happy to provide that information. We do have that. We track that in our model. And it will show you seasonality and when the timing around when property tax bills go out, when we expect revenue to come in, and we have that over probably the last at least 10 years. But we go happy to provide you with the trend lines on the major categories. There's about 100 revenue streams. We will.
Sure, just the major categories.
Sure,
All right, thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Winston. Mr. Bond, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, CFO Bala and staff for the presentation today. My question is I have two questions. The first is around our bond rating. What is our bond rating and how are we stacking up against municipalities of similar size or like?
Do you have this presentation? If you go to the last page of the presentation, we summarize our bond ratings in each of our debt portfolios. So we're very pleased that our general obligation bond rating is AA+. That's just half a notch below AAA, which is gilt-edged. So it's much more difficult to climb that last half a point to a AAA rating than it is to reduce your rating. So for instance, when the pandemic hit municipal governments across the United States, just about everyone was put on what's called credit watch, where the rating agencies are looking very closely at the impact of the pandemic on all of your revenues and expenditures. We were put on we were put on credit watch, and then recently were taken off of credit watch, where our AA rating stands, again, just half a point below AAA. There are only half a dozen municipalities in the United States that are AAA. So we're in very good position at a AA+ rating.
Thank you for that. But yeah, I wanted that to be stated. And given that we've lost the opportunity for the refinancing on the current paper that we have out, we're going to have the need to issue more debt at some point in one of these funds. How attractive is our paper going to be, which I think we can kind of guess.
I will say a couple of things. Because of our credit ratings and our general obligation bonds is a good example, investors really like Atlanta paper. A good example is the general obligation infrastructure bonds we sold and closed earlier this month. We sold late October and closed on November 3rd. We had 400 million bonds to sell, and we had over $1.2 billion of orders for those bonds. So when you have excess demand like that, we're able to actually reprice our bonds and lower the yields because we know we've got investors that are just clamoring to get our paper. The same is also true at the airport and at Watershed. There's a dearth of paper in Georgia in general, but among Georgia issuers, the city of Atlanta stands out as a shining example of a strong credit where investors love to see us come to market and buy our bonds. I will toss out a little pitch here that on January 26th, we're holding an in-person investor conference where we're inviting institutional investors from across the country to come in for a day, to do site tours of some of our key facilities, the airport, Mercedes-Benz, the Beltline, and then we'll spend an afternoon talking in depth with those investors about the state of our financials, the state of the city's financials, some of the key initiatives and strategies of the administration, the state of economic development in Atlanta. So that'll be a day that we spend selling Atlanta to the investment community.
Oh, that sounds excellent.
Yes.
Yes, my next question is not necessarily tied to the report, Mr. CFO, but I know that other cities around the country, when they're talking about trying to make sure that their, how can I say it, their information technology infrastructure and things like the VIC and the cameras have an ongoing set aside for ongoing maintenance and expansion. Is that something that we're going to be looking forward to here?
Yeah, it is. We are definitely looking forward to we've had preliminary conversations with administration as well as Commissioner Sansky about developing some type of infrastructure dollars for capital planning purposes regarding IT. So that is something we want to consider and look into for further enhancements.
I look forward to that. Mr. Chair, I need to be excused.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Bond.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Mr. CFO, you were going to say something?
I don't have a question, but I do want to take a point of privilege to bring up Chief Charles Bell to the podium. Chief Bell will be leaving us in December. A 33-year employee of the city of Atlanta, came in and also a Morehouse grad, which is probably important, and a brother of my fraternity as well. But he's a great guy. He's been with the city for 33 years. Started with the Department of Finance and spent about 20 years in the Department of Aviation. We were lucky enough to have him back in the Department of Finance leading the budget efforts during some of the most difficult budgets that the city has ever seen. And last year he got the Golden Hat Award for getting the first budget passed with no floor amendments to have to deal with on the floor on his way out. So I think he's like Jordan, so he hung it up on with the last winning shot. We just want to congratulate him for his efforts. He's done a yeoman's job and developed a very strong team here at the City of Atlanta. We're sad to see him leave, but he's built a deep bench and a strong handoff to the team that will be in place now. So, Charles, thank you for your efforts to the city of Atlanta.
Councilmember Bakhtiari.
If you want to go ahead and give us your favorite tie, we can retire it in council chambers. The one you're wearing will do just fine.
Yeah, Mr. Bell, thank you so much for your service, and it's been a pleasure working with you, so best of luck. All right, if there are no further questions on presentations, that will conclude that section of the agenda. It'll take us to the consent agenda. Ordinances for first reading. We have 3 items to sound. Ms. Linda, if you'll do the honors, please.
Yes, Mr. Chair. The first item is 220-1883. This is an ordinance by Finance Executive Committee on behalf of the Department of Parks and Recreation authorizing the Chief Financial Officer to amend the fiscal year 2023 Parks North Impact Fee Fund budget by transferring remaining balances from and to the accounts as listed in Exhibit A for the purpose of unrestricting amounts from various projects to be utilized for future projects and for other purposes. Item number 2. It's 220-1884. This is an ordinance by Finance Executive Committee to ratify services rendered in connection with Agreement FC 7611, a citywide pest control with Orkin, Inc., to authorize the mayor or his designee to enter into Amendment Number 4 to add the Atlanta Department of Transportation onto the agreement and to extend the term of the agreement on a month-to-month basis for a period of up to 1 year, beginning retroactively December 12, 2022 through December 11, 2023, or until new RFP citywide pest control services is awarded and the associated agreement fully executed, whichever occurs first, on behalf of the Departments of Enterprise Asset Management, Atlanta Police, Atlanta Department of Transportation, Aviation, Corrections, Fire, Parks and Recreation, Public Works, and Watershed Management in an amount not to exceed $49,040.00. All contracted work to be charged to and paid from the fund department account function activity listed herein and for other purposes. Item number 3 is 220-1885. This is an ordinance by the Finance Executive Committee authorizing the mayor as designee to ratify services rendered in connection with the property management agreement with JMG Realty, Inc. for management of the property and facilities at 133 Trinity Avenue, beginning June 30th, 2022, through the execution of the First Amendment to the agreement to authorize the mayor as designee to execute the First Amendment to the property management agreement, to extend the term of the agreement for 1 year, retroactively effective from June 30th, 2022 through June 30th, 2023, on behalf of Department of Enterprise Asset Management, in accordance with the agreement's existing compensation schedule and for other purposes.
Thank you, Ms. Lindo. As first reads, they've just been sounded, and we will address them during the next cycle. It takes us to ordinances for second reading. First item, 22-01862, an ordinance by Finance Executive Committee to ratify services rendered in connection with sole source agreement FC 8344 EGIS software licenses, maintenance, and technical support with Environmental Systems Research Institute, Inc., or ESRI, beginning February 10, 2022 through September 5, 2022, and to authorize the Chief Financial Officer to pay outstanding invoices on behalf of the Department of Atlanta Information Management in an amount not to exceed $472,416.00. All contracted work to be charged to and paid from fund, department, organization, and account numbers listed herein and for other purposes. Ms. Rackley, you have the floor.
Good afternoon, Daphne Rackley, Deputy CIO, and I think we have 2 papers that are related to this, the ordinance and the resolution. And just to take you back down memory lane, we were before you in January for this new contract that we're under right now for ESRI. And ESRI stands for Environmental Systems Research Institute, and it's just the enterprise GIS platform that's utilized by all the departments across the city. So it's a major piece of technology, and we've been using it since 2005. The current contract was approved through legislation back in January. However, the previous contract was expiring in February, so there was only less than a 1-month gap. And unfortunately, the language of the legislation did not allow for that bridging between the new contract and signing the old contract and signing the new contract. So this is to pay for retroactive services during that time period between February and September.
Questions for Ms. Rackley on this paper? Well, there's a resolution, so we have to take 2 separate actions anyway. So I'll do the ordinance and then read in the resolution, take care of that immediately following. Motion from Shook to approve. Is there a second? Seconded by Winston. Let's open that vote, please.
The vote is open. The vote is closed.
6 yeas, 0 nays. The motion carries. This paper is approved. The companion or the related paper is under held item number 48, 22-R 4687, a resolution by Finance Executive Committee authorizing the mayor or his designee to execute the First Amendment to sole source agreement number listed, EGIS software licenses, maintenance, and technical support with Environmental Systems Research Institute, Inc., on behalf of the Department of Atlanta Information to modify Exhibit A, Service Provider Enterprise Program Terms, and Appendix B, EA fee schedule of the agreement, and for other purposes. Any questions for Ms. Rackley on this one? There's a motion from Shook to approve, seconded by Dozier. There's no further discussion. Let's open that vote, please.
The vote is open. The vote is closed.
6 yeas, 0 nays. The motion carries. That item is approved. Thank you, Ms. Rackley. Next item is number 5, 22-01863, an ordinance by Finance Executive Committee authorizing the mayor or his designee on behalf of the city of Atlanta to execute all appropriate documents to grant a permanent easement of approximately 12,155.42 square feet and a temporary construction easement of approximately 24,246.37 square feet over a portion of city-owned property located in land lot 111 of the 15th District, DeKalb County, Georgia, tax parcel identification number listed to DeKalb County for the construction and maintenance of a trail as part of a transportation improvement project, waiving sections 2-1571 and 2-1572 of the Procurement and Real Estate Code and for other purposes. Mr. Butts.
Good afternoon, Chairman Wan, members of the committee. Marcus Butts on behalf of the Department of Watershed Management, Office of Engineering Services. This matter is based on an approach from DeKalb County and the Path Foundation to extend the South River Trail spur. The easement area will be located in the northwest corner of what is currently our Entrenchment Creek Water Reclamation Center facility, which is a little more than 151 acres. And this would be just a small portion in the northwest corner, occupying a little less than a quarter of an acre. Upon our evaluation, we did not discover any negative impact to our operations or any safety vulnerabilities. So we're hopeful that you will view this favorably.
All right, any questions for Mr. Butts? Motion from Shook to approve, seconded by Winston. No further discussion. Let's open that vote, please.
The vote is open. The vote is closed.
6 yeas, 0 nays. The motion carries. This item is approved.
Thank you.
All right, next item is 22-01864, an ordinance by Finance Executive Committee authorizing the mayor or his designee to execute sole source agreement number listed, maintenance and services for E911, Premier One CAD, and Premier One Mobile with Motorola Solutions, Inc., pursuant to Section 2-1191 of the City of Atlanta Code of Ordinances, on behalf of the Department of Atlanta Information Management, Atlanta Police, Atlanta Fire Rescue, and Aviation for a term of 2 years, retroactively commencing October 16, 2022 through October 15, 2024, with 3 one-year renewal term options in an amount not to exceed $1,574,989.00. All contracted work will be charged to and paid from the fund, department, organization, and account number listed herein and for other purposes. Go ahead, Ms. Ross.
Good afternoon, Councilman Wan and Finance Executive Committee. Orlando Ross, Business Relationship Manager, Atlanta Information Management. The legislation we're presenting is on behalf of the city's E911 Center as well as Aviation's 911 Center. We're requesting to enter into a sole source agreement with Motorola Solutions for their Premier One CAD system. This maintenance and support automates the services that are provided by the 911 Center. The CAD system also provides mobile access to that information that is gathered by the 911 Center to all the first responders. Are there any questions?
All right, any questions for Mr. Ross? Well, colleagues, we do need to amend this to attach the iPro, so I'm report. So I'm gonna make that motion. Seconded by Bakhtiari. Let's open that vote to amend, please.
The vote is open. Votes closed.
6 yeas, 0 nays, the motion carries. The paper is amended. Ms. Bakhtiari did have a question.
Question real quick for you.
Well, it may be for the CPO.
Or for the CPO. So quick question. Yeah, that would be a you question. For sole source, just given the issues with E911, I just wanted to make sure this is the best option and only option that we have for this agreement.
At this point, when we evaluated, that was the best
Can you
option.
identify yourself, please?
Oh, this is Jadeep Majumdar, Chief Procurement Officer for City of Atlanta. When we reviewed all the documents, that was the best option. Now, having said that, is there a future option that we can evaluate? We will definitely look into the market and look for future options down the road.
Fine, so move to approve.
All right, there's a motion from Bakhtiari to approve as amended. Is there a second?
As amended.
Seconded by Winston. Let's open that vote, please.
The vote is open. The vote's closed.
6 yeas, 0 nays, the motion carries. That item is approved as amended. Item number 7, 22-01865, an ordinance by Finance Executive Committee authorizing the mayor or his designee to amend the FY 2023 general fund budget to create additional department organization account numbers on behalf of the Department of Public Works, to rename existing office account numbers within the Oracle financial system, to transfer personnel, supplies, capital outlay, interfund, intergovernmental charges, and contractual obligations for the Department of Public Works and for other purposes. Ms. Davis.
Good afternoon, Chairman Wan, members of the committee. Melissa Davis, Director of Finance and Accounting for the Department of Public Works. This legislation amends Public Works fiscal year 23 general fund budget and would allow the department to create the Office of Special Services with 12 new department orgs, appropriately reallocate resources and transfer current expenses from the Solid Waste Services Revenue Fund to the General Fund in accordance with the 2022 Solid Waste Services Rate Study recommendations. The General Fund allocation is currently $20 million. However, the funds were placed in a holding account, allowing staff time to assess the current operations and complete the process of identifying which positions and equipment needed to be transferred. There will be about 121 full-time positions that are transferred, that are currently in the solid waste budget, that will be transferred to the general fund.
You're good. You're good.
Can I turn it off?
You're good.
Oh, I'm good, okay.
Yeah.
Upon approval, council approval, the department would be able to, again, appropriately allocate the resources and track expenses for these special services. Special services includes things like right-of-way maintenance, street sweeping, trash receptacle collection, lot clearing, illegal dumping, things of that nature.
All right, questions for Davis. Mr. Shook.
And then
Ms. Bakhtiari.
So this was tangentially touched on yesterday in utilities.
Yes.
So, but go over again just the timing of this and why we're doing this organization and sort of housekeeping now instead of as part of the big move that we made.
It's a real process. We had to take the time to identify which positions needed to move over. We're also having to partner with the Department of Finance and the Department of Procurement to create these positions and make sure that we're removing the proper expenses as well as closing and opening new POs in the general fund. So we took the time needed in order to make sure that we had everything accounted for to move from the Solid Waste Services Revenue Fund over into the general fund. So we just wanted to make sure that we did everything in proper order.
Okay. Are there any other, is any other legislation required to complete what we thought we had already completed? Because this is kind of a PTSD subject for this body.
This is the only legislation I know that's coming forward. We did submit the positions in the to Human Resources for the personnel paper.
Thank you.
Councilmember Bakhtiari.
thank you. Just a quick question. Let's say hypothetically there ended up being a surplus in the budget after we did the study. How would this affect the current move of funding?
A surplus in the solid waste revenue fund?
Correct.
Well, we were operating in a deficit for many years, and so I think that any increase or any, I guess, overage in revenue would be welcome so that we could address some of our capital needs. We have certainly some dire needs for our facility maintenance plans, as well as for equipment maintenance.
That is very true. And also, by construct, because it is a deficit fund, if there is a surplus past capital needs and operational needs that they might have, it will have to go to reduce the deficit fund.
Into general fund?
Huh?
Surplus would go back into which fund account?
Solid waste deficit will need to be addressed first.
But the beauty of the enterprise fund is that, so after, say, second quarter and at December 31, we have 6 months of operating experience. And if there are improvements that are implemented and we are starting to see some cost reduction, there could be some decisions made in the second half of the year in terms of investments or, like you said, going back and paying down the deficits.
Certainly, and our leadership team is already having conversations about the capital plans that we need to have in place for the equipment and also for our facilities.
That's great. Thank you. That answers my question. I just wanted some clarification on that and to highlight the points you brought up. So thank you.
Pleasure.
So the paper we did in utilities yesterday morning moved about $8 million that you said was in kind of this holding account until all this got squared away. So once these accounts get set up, those funds move over. The balance of the 12 million general fund funds will just essentially be expended as they're expended and applied against these accounts now that they're set up, correct?
Right. So as I discussed yesterday, we are moving over those funds and any expenses that we've incurred year to date, and so that will address to the first 5 months of the fiscal year, and any expense thereafter will hit the general fund directly.
Okay. So they're just reconciling the whole 20 million for us, how that mechanically all works. Any other questions on this paper? Is there a motion? I'll put forward a motion to approve, seconded by Bakhtiari. If there's no further discussion, let's open that account. Let's open that vote, please.
The vote is open.
Let's open an account, sure.
The vote is closed.
All right, 6 yeas, 0 nays, the motion carries. Thank you.
My pleasure.
All right, so colleagues, if there's no objection if there are no objections, I will take items 8, 9, and 15 together as they are council carry forward actions. 22-01868, an ordinance by Councilmember Matt Westmoreland authorizing a donation in an amount not to exceed $5,000.00 from the Post 2 at-large carry forward account to Hope Atlanta to support affordable housing initiatives and for other purposes. 22-01869, an ordinance by Councilmember Matt Westmoreland authorizing a donation in an amount not to exceed $25,000.00 from the Post 2 at-large carry-forward account to Grove Park Renewal to support affordable housing initiatives and for other purposes. 22-01880, an ordinance by Councilmember Liliana Bakhtiari authorizing the transfer of $20,000.00 from the Council District 5 carry-forward account to the Council District 5 distribution account to continue serving the Atlanta community for the public good and for other purposes. Any discussion on that? Number 10, we have to substitute, so there will be a separate action on that one. A motion from Shook to approve 8, 9, and 15, seconded by Bakhtiari. Let's open that vote, please.
The vote is open. The vote is closed. Yeah, we're having it's a unanimous vote.
Okay, 6 yeas, 0 nays, the motion carries. Those 3 items are approved. Next item is 22-01870, an ordinance by Councilmember Antonio Lewis authorizing the transfer of $2,000.00 from the Council District 12 carry-forward account to Department of Parks and Recreation to assist with sponsoring the youth football program and for other purposes. Colleagues, there is a substitute for this that inserts the appropriate accounts for the Department of Parks donation. I'll move to bring that forward. Shook seconds. Let's open the vote to bring forward the substitute, please.
The vote is open. The vote is closed.
6 yeas, 0 nays, the motion carries. Substitute is before us. Is there any discussion on this? Motion from Shook to approve on substitute, seconded by Bakhtiari. Let's open the vote, please.
The vote is open. The vote is closed.
6 yeas, 0 nays. The motion carries. That item is approved on substitute. Next item, 22-01872, and there is a substitute for this, but I'll read in the caption first. Ordinance by council members Overstreet, Lewis, Westmoreland, and Bond, amending Chapter 2, Article 3, Division 1, Section 2-190B, Chapter 2, Article 4, Section 2-196, Chapter 2, Article 4, Section 2-197, and Chapter 2, Article 4, Section 2-202 of the City of Atlanta Code of Ordinances to establish the Mayor's Office of Sustainability and Resilience, to authorize the Chief Financial Officer to create the appropriate department organizations, and to anticipate and appropriate the necessary funding in connection with the creation of the Mayor's Office of Sustainability and Resilience, to authorize the Chief Financial Officer and the Commissioner of the Department of Human Resources to transfer any positions currently assigned to any office or department operating under the executive branch to the Mayor's Office of Sustainability and Resilience, as shall be necessary to facilitate the immediate commencement of the operation of the Mayor's Office of Sustainability and Resilience, and for other purposes. I'll move to bring the substitute forward that modifies the legal terms and inserts the department organization code, seconded by Shook. Let's open that vote, please.
The vote is open. The vote is closed.
6 yeas, 0 nays. The motion carries. The substitute is before us. Mr. Pace. I was expecting Ms. Farley.
Momentarily, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, Councilmember Juan, members of the committee. Theo Pace, Deputy Chief of Staff, Office of the Mayor. What this legislation does is in 2009, the Division of Sustainability was created to provide more efforts for sustainable Atlanta. Last year, the Office of Sustainability was moved under the Office of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion. And what this legislation does is would create a standalone Office of Sustainability and Resilience to basically provide the purview and scope of over sustainability and resilience in the city. And what I would like to do is bring up the director, my apologies, the Chief Sustainability Officer, Ms. Chandra Farley, just to answer any questions and provide her vision and goals for the office.
Okay, Ms. Farley.
Good afternoon, Chairman Juan, and thank you to Councilmember Overstreet and the co-sponsors, and to the committee. I'm happy to answer any questions, but am really just here as someone who's been in partnership with the city's various formations of sustainability and resilience office formations for almost a decade. This is a really exciting moment to officially codify this office. It's critically important, particularly as we have an opportunity now to really meet this movement moment where finances, interdepartmental coordination, and opportunity, and real serious need to support our residents is critical. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
All right, thank you, Ms. Farley. Howard Shook, you are up first.
I noticed on the handout here that of the 12 positions cited, half are vacant. Are there any particular barriers to getting these positions filled?
Budget is one, so that will be first. So one of the first things I will be looking forward to, and I've caught CFO Bala in a couple of cabinet meetings about understanding the budgeting process. So I understand that's the next step that is coming. There are a couple of priority hires. One of those is the clean energy director, and then two others, the senior recycling manager and a project manager. There are two others that are listed as, they're vacant right now, but they are budgeted for through ARPA allocations for fellowships, so that hopefully that helps with sort of the balance of what those vacant positions are.
Councilmember Bakhtiari.
I can't talk today. Hi, Dr. Farley. So really excited this is happening.
Me too.
Yes. And I, would love to amend to actually be able to sign on a sponsor. This is incredible. I'm very excited to see this happening. I'm curious as to, does this mean that the Sustainability Office would actually be able to give oversight to certain planning measures. Obviously, we have rapidly worsening air quality. We're ranked in the top 10 cities for that. We have doing top 5 for energy burden, which obviously, as you very well know, is a driving cost for displacement from housing. And we very well know that vastly differs between North and South Atlanta. So in terms of moving forward with this, and the fact that we know that we are increased flash floods, et cetera, will you all be able to implement, or will we be able to use the Sustainability Office to codify new building requirements to ensure that we're actually doing things to combat the heat island, reduce energy burden, et cetera, find new revenue streams for that? Will y'all be able to have that type of authority?
So I believe so. I'm going to tag in Attorney Moses on what that particular authority is. But I will say, I think it's important to understand the Office of Sustainability and Resilience can set policy, provide targets, but all of that work is operationalized through the departments.
Got it.
So our interdepartmental coordination and partnerships will be key. So what I've been working on since September 29 is just meeting with all the department heads. Deputy COO Otta even pulled together a sustainability infrastructure meeting with some of the other department heads. So that more direct partnership and coordination on those efforts is going to be key.
I have to tell you, I'm really excited to work on the heat vulnerability assessment with you, and then also the citywide stormwater assessment that we're working on to talk about all this. And I'm very excited that you were appointed director just in time to go into phase 2 of the TPO. So,
yes, my inbox stays full about that as well.
Oh, yeah.
So we have a meeting coming up with Commissioner Johnny Prince next week about that. So.
Well, I'm very excited about this and really looking forward to working with you.
Me too.
Want to get the question from?
Yes, please.
Attorney.
Councilmember Bakhtiari, it's difficult to speak. It's difficult to speak in generalities. We can do some things, but we're constrained by state law, especially with regards to air emissions.
Are we talking about the fact that the state, I believe it was last year or the year before, set the precedent that we could not do our own energy, or we could not, I'll dig into those preemptions later. Okay.
Yeah, there's different things for different measures, for example, air, water. So it's difficult to speak in generalities, but we can answer questions as we get more specific examples.
I mean, yeah, thank you. I will stress to the state how important air and water is to human survival. So appreciate you. Thank you. Looking forward to working with you.
Absolutely.
Before we take a motion, I actually want to make a motion to amend to add my name to the paper. Do you want? So can we add Bakhtiari, and Dozier, anybody else? Waits? And okay, if you could add those names, look, and you'll second that, Bakhtiari?
Second, if you can add all the finance committee to that paper.
Mr. Chair, just to confirm, that's Bakhtiari, Winston, Dozier, and Juan.
And Waits.
And Waits. Thank you.
All right, there's a motion and a second from Bakhtiari. Let's open the vote to amend, please.
The vote is open. The vote's closed.
6 yeas, 0 nays. The motion carries. The paper is amended. Now I'll make the motion to adopt as amended, seconded by Bakhtiari. Let's open that vote, please.
One moment. The vote is open. The vote's closed.
6 yeas, 0 nays. The motion carries. The amended paper is approved. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
All right, item number 12, 22-01873, an ordinance by Councilmember Andrea L. Boone to waive Chapter 2, Article 9, Division 1, Section 2-910, grant application to ratify the City of Atlanta submission in partnership with the United Way of Greater Atlanta of an application for the Bank on Tax Time Connect Planning Grant from the Cities for Financial Empowerment Fund to implement a program to focus on creative approaches to integrate banking access into existing free tax preparation programs that serve populations that are largely or underbanked or otherwise creatively facilitate banking access, to to authorize the mayor or his designee to enter into any required agreements necessary for the implementation of this award and for other purposes. Ms. Kazi, is it Kazi? Is that right?
Thank you so much, Chairman Wan, and to the members of the committee. Thank you for entertaining this paper. At the 30-day end mark, looking back at a lot of the undone work for the Office of Innovation under the Mayor's Office, we found that this legislation was required to ratify a relationship between the City of Atlanta and the United Way of Greater Atlanta for the Bank on Tax Connect Planning Grant. So this is very wordy because it's a lot of different components to it, but the reality is it's a $20,000 grant, $15,000 grant to help educate people on the Bank On program. And Bank On provides banking services for people who go to check cashing locations and expensive ways to provide financial services. So the city believes that we should help our community. The Bank On program offers low-cost $5 banking fees for people who can't bank otherwise, and even for people who can't bank in traditional banking circumstances. So we're asking that the grant that we entered into with United Way be ratified through legislation, if possible.
And just for the benefit of the viewing public, you're with which department in the city? Sorry.
I'm sorry, Trina Kazi, Office of Innovation and Performance, Office of the Mayor. Thank you.
All right, questions for Ms. Kazi? Seeing none, is there a motion? Motion from Shook, seconded by Bakhtiari. Let's open that vote, please.
The vote is open. The vote's closed.
6 yeas, 0 nays. The motion carries. The item is approved.
Thank you.
All right, 22-01875, an ordinance by Councilmember Andrea L. Boone authorizing the mayor or his designee waiving Section 2-1163, Article 10 of the Procurement and Real Estate Code of the City of Atlanta Code of Ordinances to enter into Amendment Number 1 on a month-to-month basis for a period not to exceed 12 months, effective from December 26, 2022 through December 25, 2023, for FC 9969, Workers' Compensation Third-Party Administration Services with PMA Management Corp., to provide workers' compensation third-party administration services to the City of Atlanta on behalf of the Department of Finance, Office of Enterprise Risk Management, in an amount not to exceed $612,900.00. All contracted work to be charged to and paid from the fund department organization account numbers listed and for other purposes. Mr. DeLoach, if you could come to the mic, please. Tell us a little bit about this paper, kind of particularly about the need to go to the month-to-month.
Good afternoon. My name is Jerry DeLoach, Chief Risk Officer in the Office of Enterprise Risk Management out of the Department of Finance. This is a request for a month-to-month extension for our agreement with PMA, which is our third-party administrator for our workers' compensation program. They provide support for the program by managing the doctors and the payment of bills, not only to the providers, but as well as to the employees. We are asking for a month-to-month, and the reason why we are late is because of multiple priorities that the Office of Enterprise Risk Management has been engaged in for this year, including but not limited to managing the ARPA funds, as well as a new OSIP 5 that we launched at the Department of Aviation in March of this year. In addition, we have a young staff in ERM, and we are in the process of we are in the process of mentoring them and providing them with training. As an example, today I'm providing the information regarding this amendment, but when the actual contract come up in the spring, the risk manager will actually make their presentation to get them used to coming before the committee. The request is made to allow us time to complete the RFP process. That trigger package will be sent to Department of Procurement no later than Friday, and I've communicated that to them. And we've asked for 12 months, but my expectation is that we will have a contract in place before the end of this fiscal year. I'm hoping to have it within the next 6 months.
Hey, the contract procurement's working wonders now. So yeah, any other questions for Mr. DeLoach? Seeing none, I'll make the motion to approve, seconded by Winston. There's no further discussion. Let's open the vote, please.
Thank you all.
The vote is open. Votes closed.
5 yeas, 0 nays. The motion carries. The item is approved. Okay, next item is 22-01876. And without objection, and there's a companion resolution, which I'll take immediately following our action on the ordinance, but it's 22-01876. Ordinance by Councilmember Dustin Hillis authorizing the Chief Financial Officer to amend the fiscal year 2023 general fund budget by transferring to and from appropriations the amount of $528,791 to provide funding for the first year of a contract authorizing the acquisition of a case management system for the Office of the Solicitor and for other purposes. Mr. Raines, you have the floor.
Good afternoon, Chairman Wan, and all members of the Finance Executive Committee, CFO, and all staff. I'm Raines Carter, City Solicitor, and I'm very happy to bring this to you for your consideration. This is the culmination of a 3-year effort that we have been pushing forward to automate many of our processes in the Solicitor's Office. Over the course of the 3 years, we have had partners to join us. The Mayor's Office of Innovation, AIM has joined us, and the Department of Finance itself. And basically what we are seeking to accomplish is for the first time to have our case management system to carry out our city and state required functions. We are required by law to screen, prepare, and present all cases before the court for disposition. And we have the authority by state law to amend, divert, and to accuse citations. And what has happened over the past years is that we have been doing these things manually, and our processes have become antiquated. So we first started on this in 2019, and of course, we've had the pandemic to take place. And so we really got things moving last year, but we knew that we wouldn't be ready in time for budget consideration for last year. So we have been able, with the Mayor's Office, with the Department of Finance, and with AIM, to really pull this together so that we will be able to effectively do these things that need to be done. One of the features will be data exchange with all of our law enforcement agencies. We have several agencies in addition to APD that input into our court system. Well, this will provide the proper interfaces that will allow us to do it much more efficiently and get away from a lot of the paper and pencil processes that basically slow down the court process. We will be able to generate documents such as citations, warrants, accusations, motions, and other pleadings that go into the system. And the most exciting part about this is that we're going to have a public-facing component, a public portal that would allow the porter to interact with the solicitor's office to make sure that they receive proper communications, notices, subpoenas, and they would be able to actually have real-time information regarding the disposition of their cases. And we will be doing all this in compliance with all of state and city sunshine laws. What we're getting to in terms of the expected benefits, number one is that we are looking at possible cost savings because there are a lot of head count and a lot of hours, manual hours, that go into doing things in a manual process. This is going to speed things up. Also, it can have an impact on revenue because it will create more opportunities for diversion. For example, and of course, we're not in the money-making business, but I'll just give you an example. At the height of our processes that we had put together manually for our diversion programs, we had gotten up to $6 million. What we're able to do now is to take a look at, with this public-facing portal and the opportunities that we have, to actually see if we can have more people come into diversion programs. And if you look at it from another perspective, it also cuts down on the footprint of people having to come into court to be put on diversion when we have an ability to do it ahead of time. So we are really excited about this project. We made our presentation to the administration back in May, and we have had some people that have really stepped out and put their best foot forward to help us through this, and we would appreciate your consideration.
All right, just questions or comments for Mr. Raines. First up is Councilmember Waits.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you again for the presentation. Question for you. Would this particular project relieve any of the case backlog that may be before us? Would it be helpful in that? And secondly, what is it that you do with the revenue that you generate? Where does that go?
The revenue goes to the general fund. And to answer the first part of your question, absolutely. Anytime that we can improve efficiencies, it's actually going to help with case movement. For example, when you have a case management system, and we looked at a case management system in California, and they were able to move their cases in about half the time that we are doing now. And after an evaluation of about 4 different processes that we looked at, we saw that we can really increase these efficiencies because we're doing things with spreadsheets, paper and pencil, labor intensive with people. And a lot of these things now are being put in case management systems. And the other aspect of this, it can interface with other case management systems with other jurisdictions, Fulton County, DeKalb County, Clayton County for our cases that are at the airport. So we think that this is a game changer. This is a good step forward for us as a city.
Mr. Shook.
Yeah, to follow up, so I'm not on public safety, but just from kind of looking in from the outside, I appear to have the impression that there's an awful big backlog of people awaiting jury trials. And are those people awaiting jury trials because that's what they requested? I mean, specifically, how would this help speed things up? Or would this not necessarily help with people going into a jury trial line, but would it help after they get there?
Well, what happens, Councilman Shook, is that we at our level don't have the jury trial jurisdiction. However, we are the preliminary step when people are initially charged. So the person could come into the court system and they have to make a decision in terms of requesting their right to a jury trial. We're talking about actually using this to expedite that part of the process. Now, once we do that, if we're able to do that efficiently by the first and second appearance of a case, hopefully the first, then it goes over into the state and superior court system. However, now it could be subject to whatever's going on over there, but we want to expedite the process on the front end, and we think this will be very helpful in allowing us to do so.
Any further questions or comments? Motion from Shook to approve, seconded by Winston. Let's open that vote, please.
Thank you.
The vote is open. The vote's closed.
5 yeas, 0 nays. The motion carries. This item is approved. Mr. Raines, I was going to have you stay up here because we're going to take your resolution accompanies that, which is item number 17, 22-R4701. It's a resolution by Councilmember Dustin Hillis authorizing the mayor or his designee to execute special procurement agreement number listed, Office of the City of Solicitor Case Management System with Icon Holdco, Inc., on behalf of the Office of the City Solicitor pursuant to Section 2-1191.1 of the City of Atlanta Code of Ordinances for a term of 3 years with 4 one-year renewals in an amount not to exceed $894,623.00. Thank you. All contracted work will be charged to and paid from the fund department organization and account number listed herein and for other purposes. In terms of housekeeping, we need to amend this to attach the DOP certification memo. I will make that motion. Seconded by Shook. Sorry. Let's open the vote to amend, please.
The vote is open. Vote's closed.
5 yeas, 0 nays. The motion carries. The paper is amended. Mr. Raines has explained to us what this does. I do have a question, though. The amount that's listed in the caption of $894,000.
Yes.
There's another amount that the previous paper mentioned of $528,000. So is one like the total contract amount and one's just the first?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
All right, thank you, CFO Bala. Any other questions on this paper? Seeing none, I'll make a motion to approve as amended, seconded by Dozier. Comes alive. Let's open that vote, please.
The vote is open.
Thank you.
The vote's closed.
5 yeas, 0 nays, the motion carries. That item is approved as amended. All right, we've taken care of item 15, so now move on to item 16 in resolutions, 22-R4700, resolution by council members Lewis, Winston, Amos, Boone, Hillis, Overstreet, Bond, Westmoreland, Waits, Dozier, and Bakhtiari, authorizing the mayor or his designee to execute special procurement agreement number listed and Lake Charlotte Nature Preserve Carbon Credit Program with Urban Forest Carbon Registry, doing business as City Forest Credits on behalf of the City of Atlanta pursuant to Section 2-1191.1 of the City of Atlanta Code of Ordinances for a term of 40 years in an amount not to exceed $392,500.00. All contracted work will be charged to and paid from the fund department organization and account number listed herein. And for the purposes, we need to amend this to attach the DOP certification memo. I'll make that motion. Seconded by Winston. Let's open the vote to amend, please.
The vote is open. The vote's closed.
5 yeas, 0 nays, the motion carries. The item amended item is before us. Mr. Seidel, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chairman Wan. And the members of the FEC committee, I'm John R. Seidel, Deputy Chief Sustainability Officer for the Mayor's Office of Resilience. Hopefully sustainability and resilience. I'm here to brief you on this innovative project to start the first urban forest preservation carbon credit project in the Southeast for any local government. As background for those who aren't familiar with carbon markets, think of one carbon credit as 1 ton of CO2 equivalent for emissions. Carbon credits are based on permanence, and permanence is based on providing long-term carbon benefit and establishing permanent, lasting carbon credit capture from the time the carbon was absorbed. For forest preservation carbon credits, permanence is dictated in 40 or 100-year terms in carbon credit protocols, both in the voluntary and compliance market, and 40 years is the minimum term. Buyers in the carbon credit market require carbon credits established by high-quality protocols that establish permanence. Any lower than that is less than the industry standard and have a low likelihood of actually being sold on the carbon market. And just looking at average prices for carbon credits, in 2021, they're $3.82, and that's up from $2.49 in 2020. And do remember those prices. I have a brief overview around Lake Charlotte Nature Preserve, around City Forest Credits in front of you, and the impacts associated with it. It would take about 1 minute. Are you all okay with me going through it?
Quickly, yes.
Awesome. All right, Lake Charlotte Nature Preserve, 216 acres, 90% forest coverage, and was purchased in 2020 with tree recompense funds. And because of that, that property must be explicitly dedicated and preserved in perpetuity as forested land. City Forest Credits is a 501c3 nonprofit carbon credit registry organization established in 2015 to advance urban forestry. They do 2 different types of carbon credit programs, one based on tree plantings, another based on forest preservation, like in our situation today. So in order to receive carbon credits through their protocol, it's based on 40 or 100 years. We've chosen the 40 years. And so wanted to hit that. And the cost associated with this project, you see the $392,500. Breaking that down, $17,500. That's the application fees, the verification. Think of it as kind of the upfront cost of going for it. And then the rest of it, the $375,000, is based, and no greater than $375,000, is based on the sales of the carbon credits City Forest Credits will take 10% of anything that's sold. So if we sell, if they're getting paid $375,000, that means the city sold $750,000 in gross sales for their carbon credits, and the city nets $3,375,000 in net revenue for the city. Not bad given the price. And so just running through potential all the impacts. We're projecting around $2 million and trying to be conservative, and it depends on the sale, and actual carbon credits are going to be determined through the verification of this process. So remember when I told you that $382 was the average price for 2021 carbon credits? Well, City Forest Credits is unique because they have these Carbon Plus credits because they recognize that urban forests actually have a little bit more value in terms of public and social health benefits versus rural forests. We talked a little bit today about urban heat, and forests are some of the best ways to fight urban heat. And they actually have measures in this protocol that actually measures air quality improvement as well as measuring rainfall interception. So yes, it fights climate change, promotes climate resilience on urban heat, sanctuaries for wildlife, also includes stormwater benefits, acting as green infrastructure. Urban forests are important. So therefore, looking at what their last selling price was when they're actually selling the carbon credits, they were selling it for $34 per carbon credit. That's over 9 times the amount of the amount versus the average carbon credit on the regular carbon market. These funds would help support additional sustainability and climate action efforts of our office, as Chief Farley talked about today. And it also presents itself as a potential solution to support stewardship and maintenance of Lake Charlotte Nature Preserve. Up here I have a letter of support from the Department of Parks and Recreation. I've printed enough for everybody here. I've also given the electronic copy to Ms. Lindo. And so, in conclusion, this project can help create funds. The city is going to be protecting this property in perpetuity. We can get compensated through carbon credits for what we're already planning to do to help support sustainability issues and to help meet, as you'll see in this letter, the maintenance needs of places like the Lake Charlotte Nature Preserve, which is only funded for 5 years since it was purchased, and then it's a funding gap for continuous maintenance after that. So I'm hoping that this is not a one-off. I'm hoping that this is a successful project and can be scaled to new properties in the future that are purchased using the tree recompense funds and is a self-perpetuating cycle. Thank you. I'm open for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Seidel. Questions? Councilmember Bakhtiari.
Well, after that extensive presentation, you've knocked out most of my questions.
I was hoping to.
Yeah, but it's almost like, we should be doing cluster developments instead of urban sprawl. Go figure. But a conversation for another time. I was just curious as to why the conservative, I love it. Why conservative instead of, why shoot for a lesser amount instead of a longer time period?
Well, it depends on the city. When we actually have these carbon credits held by this carbon credit registry, it's on the city to go out and sell it. So we can go and market it to, I'm just saying as an example, Delta Airlines buys a lot of carbon credits. And then there's interest from companies to buy carbon credits that actually have more public benefit, especially those that are local, and can help benefit, people that work for Delta, people that are customers of Delta, and inherently might even pay more than $34. So it's on the city. Of course, it could be less than $34 too, but just based upon the growth in the carbon market, and if you look at, even coming out of COP27, there's a lot of companies here in Atlanta that have really strong climate commitments, and they need to meet those commitments by a lot of different actions, including purchasing carbon credits. And in terms of carbon credits, this is one of the best carbon credit program out there.
Well, hint taken, and move for approval.
Other questions or comments from my colleagues? I have one. So we are basically purchasing and then the opportunity to resell these credits. Those funds would then come back into this fund for deployment, as you said, in terms of other sustainability initiatives. And I just want to confirm that everything is going to be contained in this trust fund that's listed on here.
Yeah, that's correct. Oh.
Did you try to get it for the general fund? Is that what you said?
Well, the way that it's structured, that fund is structured, is that it is a revolving fund. And so any funds that come out of that fund have to be reimbursed. And this is a great program to be able to help reimburse. And then it's a lot more flexible than if it went to the tree recompense fund, where it has very specific uses for the tree recompense fund. And even just buying new properties with the tree recompense fund, there are, I think, only 5 years of protection. I think it's also being discussed, it might be 3 years using for maintenance. And so by coming back into this fund, it can help support our sustainability work, as well as, help with gaps in maintenance funding.
Is this fund overseen by it? I mean, will it be overseen and managed by the Office of Sustainability and Resilience?
Yeah, it is a trust fund, and that trust fund falls under the mayor's office account string trust fund, so it's managed by them. And we had conversations earlier on in the development process that this is a good structure to advance the initiatives that are underfunded and unfunded in their purview. So when we constructed this initially, this was
The only reason why I ask is I think you mentioned that this fund gives a little more flexibility, and that can be a double-edged sword. I mean, to a certain degree, that's a good thing. But there are critics out there that say that at times we stretch the limits of our trust funds in terms of their application and usage. And there's a conversation going on about that right now.
Right.
With another paper. So,
well, these are the funds that we had to be able to apply, to even put in the application in the first place. And also, to put our capacity towards doing this really comprehensive work is difficult. And I also want to give a shout out to Finance, Department of Parks and Recreation, as well as our internal, external partners, Department of Law especially, that got us here. This type of collaborative spirit allows us to be able to do these innovative programs.
All right, so that it prevent Howard from going and chopping down a tree out of frustration for extending this conversation, there is a motion and a second. Let's open the vote, please.
Mr. Wan, can you, Mr. Chair, can you?
I believe it was Bakhtiari and then Dozier.
Thank you. The vote is open. The vote is closed.
6 yeas, 0 nays, the motion carried. This item is approved as amended. Thank you, Mr. Seidel. All right, we've already dispensed with number 17. That takes us to 18. 22-R4706, a resolution by Councilmember Alex Wan authorizing the mayor or his designee to execute a special procurement agreement number listed, professional development services with the University of Georgia's Carl Vinson Institute on behalf of the Department of Finance for use by various city departments pursuant to Section 2-1191.1 of the City of Atlanta Code of Ordinances for the purpose of providing professional development services for a term of 3 years in an amount not to exceed $133,680.00. All contracted work will be charged to and paid from the appropriate fund, department, organization, and account numbers. And for other purposes, we need to amend this to attach the procurement memos. All right, motion from Dozier to amend, seconded by Bakhtiari. Let's open that vote, please.
The vote is open. The vote is closed.
6 yeas, 0 nays, the motion carries. That paper is amended. Ms. Carr, if you'll tell us about it.
Good afternoon, Yolanda Carr, Interim Deputy CFO. This legislation that's before you is for the University of Georgia Carl Vinson Institute for $133,680 for 3 years. And so essentially what they'll be doing for us is providing accounting services, classes, budgeting 101, budgeting Part 2, and other classes offered for the Carl Vinson Institute.
All right, questions from Ms. Carr.
I just have to say it's incredibly cruel of you all to make a Georgia diehard tech fan allocate funding to UGA. Look at him, he's going to...
Move to no, I'm kidding. Is there a motion?
Second.
All right, there's a motion from Dozier to approve as amended, seconded by Bakhtiari.
Chair, you can't abstain based on personal bias.
I'm a spiritual and moral. I'm kidding. Oh, thanks.
The vote is closed.
6 yeas, 0 nays, the motion carries. The item is approved as amended. Next item is 22-R4707, resolution by Councilmember Alex Juan authorizing the mayor or his designee to execute a cooperative purchasing agreement for contract number listed, GSA cooperative agreement with Vertosoft for Workiva Cloud Services for the connected government financial reporting solution with WData, utilizing the GSA contract number listed on behalf of the Department of Finance, Watershed Management, and Aviation for a term to begin December 19, 2022 through June 18, 2023, with 2 one-year renewal options in an amount not to exceed $70,676.04. All contracted work will be charged to and paid from the accounts listed and for other purposes. We need to amend. Bakhtiari's made a motion to amend, seconded by Dozier, to attach the procurement memos. Let's open that vote, please.
The vote is open.
West Wing is on fire down there.
Vote is closed.
6 yeas, 0 nays, the motion carries. The amended paper is before us. Ms. Carr.
So last week or the prior FEC meeting, we had legislation where we had it expired for Workiva. And so now we're coming back with the co-op for Vertosoft so that we can make sure that we have services in place. And again, we use this software for our annual comprehensive financial report, Watershed, Aviation, as well as Central. So we're just asking for permission to go ahead into a co-op agreement with Vertosoft.
Questions or comments? Motion from Shook, seconded by Winston. West Wing denied. Let's open the vote, please.
The vote is open. The vote is closed.
6 yeas, 0 nays, the motion carries. The item is approved as amended. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Carr. All right, 22-R4710, a resolution by Councilmember Byron D. Amos authorizing the City of Atlanta to accept a donation of services in the form of the services of one local democracy fellow who shall work cooperatively with the Mayor's Office of Intergovernmental Affairs during a one-year fellowship from Baltimore Core, Inc. as operator of the City Corps program, valued in an amount not to exceed $80,000.00, to authorize the mayor on behalf of the city to enter into any necessary agreements in connection therewith and for other purposes. Ms. Mitchell.
Well, good afternoon. Thank you. First off, I want
And
to
identify yourself.
Oh,
and position
sorry.
for the-
Yeah, I just started talking. Kenyatta Mitchell, Director of Intergovernmental Affairs for the Mayor's Office. First, I want to express my gratitude to Citicorp. Citicorp is the funder of this grant. They've decided to make an investment in democracy in Atlanta. We all know that democracy in Atlanta is democracy across the nation, democracy across the world. This democracy fellow is going to be tasked with partnering with the city to strengthen civic participation. So what we all hear constantly is we come out when people are supposed to vote, we talk, and we leave them. This will give us an opportunity to do, for the following year, civic engagement with our citizens. So I am extraordinarily excited about this. I am, can't begin to tell you how happy I am. I've been working on this for the past year, so thank y'all.
All right, motion from Winston to approve, seconded by Bakhtiari. Any questions or comments? All right, let's open the vote, please.
The vote is open. The vote is closed.
6 yeas, 0 nays, the motion carries. This item is approved. When would they start?
We are interviewing now,
Are you?
so we're going to
Cool.
start. Yeah, we should have somebody by the beginning of January.
Vote, vote, vote. All right, next item, 22-R4711, resolution by Councilmember Jason Dozier authorizing the mayor or his designee on behalf of the Department of City Planning to execute special procurement agreement number listed, short-term rental software with Granicus LLC, pursuant to Section 2-1191.1 of the City of Atlanta Code of Ordinances for software services to enforce the requirements for short-term rentals for a term of 1 year with one-year renewal option in an amount not to exceed $249,780.98. All contracted work will be charged to and paid from the account listed herein and for other purposes. We need to amend this to attach the Department of Procurement Certification Memo. Motion by Bakhtiari, second by Dozier. Let's open the vote, please, to amend.
The vote is open. The vote is closed.
6 yeas, 0 nays, the motion carries. The amended paper is before us. Mr. Pace.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Chair Juan and committee members. Gregory Pace, Director of the Office of Buildings, Department of City Planning. DCP needs to acquire a software vendor to provide monitoring, automated monitoring and enforcement of the short-term rental ordinance. Granicus is the software vendor that we've looked into, and they provide a very robust automated service, that software that provides the monitoring and enforcement of the short-term rental license. Currently, this is a special procurement that we're trying to gain with Granicus that will allow us major savings in resources and in staff time. We currently are using Acela for the licensing portion. However, this software will allow for more user-friendly access. It will also allow for monitoring, also enforcement, and a 24/7 kind of hotline for everyone to make calls for complaints and things of that nature. We sought a cooperative type of software and SaaS solution from a National Cooperative Purchasing Alliance, but that RFP did not address the needs of the City of Atlanta's short-term rental license. And therefore, we solicited 12 requests for quotes. We got back two. Two of those two were the only ones that were responsive. Of those two, Granicus was the lowest. And so your consideration for this is greatly appreciated.
Questions from my colleagues, Mr. Bakhtiari?
No, love it, but quick question, will this wait to go into effect until after we have passed
No,
regulations?
we're actually wanting to get this done as quickly as possible so that we can get ahead of it. Now, I don't know, I can't recall the time frame it takes for the software to be installed, but we need to at least start at this. We need to start as quickly as possible because of.
Oh, yes, no,
the time frame.
that part completely understand, completely agree. Just wondering, once it is up and we have it, et cetera, will you begin using it? Will use of this not happen until after regulations are passed?
Right. We will utilize it for registration purposes and licensing purposes, but for enforcement, because that is what's at standstill at this present time, we won't use it for those purposes.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify before my phone started blowing up. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yes.
So where are we with that piece of it? The actual kind of, I was under the impression or understanding that there were some revisions to the program that were being contemplated in light of I don't want to say litigation, but potential for litigation that needed to be done and then incorporated into whatever platform we're using. Where are we with that?
Well, what happened is they were in negotiations with that. What happened is there was another case that was litigated in another state.
Okay.
And that basically averted us to the point where we needed to revise what we were looking at. So we're working with legal now, Jonathan Futrell, of course, in the law department, as well as Ms. Amber Robinson, who's here as well, to fine tune that again. And they will be presenting, I think it was mentioned beginning of January, to present something to council in regards to that and speak to council members as well regarding those changes and amendment.
But regardless of whatever adjustments are made in terms of the program requirements and the enforcement piece of it, the platform will remain the same. Will be flexible enough for us to use this platform to apply to those regulations.
That's correct.
Okay. All right. And yeah, I appreciate Councilmember Bakhtiari clarifying that this simply is just the system, but we won't flip the enforcement switch on until depending on if the companion paper, related paper, moves through council on Monday for the convention.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, is there any further discussion? Motion from Bakhtiari, second by Dozier. Let's open that vote, please.
The vote is open. The vote's closed.
6 yeas, 0 nays. The motion carries. This item is approved as amended. Thank you, Mr. Pace.
Thank you.
All right, number 22, which is 22-R4717, a resolution by Councilmember Amir Faroki, amending Resolution 22-R4256, authorizing the mayor or his designee to issue task order number FC 10 number listed for contract FC 10641M job order contracting services small with Rubio and Sons Interiors for the construction of the Center for Diversion Services to add additional funding in an amount not to exceed $512,345.86 on behalf of the Department of Enterprise Asset Management. All work to be charged to and paid from accounts listed and for other purposes. Mr. Santiago.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. Remy Santil, Commissioner of Department of Enterprise Asset Management. This resolution is as stated to add additional dollars for this project at the Diversion Center.
Questions from, is this simply just as the progress is moving forward at the additional money, or is this a budget, like a change order project budget change?
Right, so the original task came over to you all, I believe, last 2 months ago, I believe. We got the final quote, and the final quote was higher than the original, so this is the variance between
Closes that gap. All right, any questions? Motion from Winston, second from Bakhtiari. Let's open the vote, please.
The vote is open. The vote is closed.
6 yeas, 0 nays, the motion carries. This item is approved. Next item, 22-R4719, a resolution by council members Jason Winston and Jason Dozier, authorizing the mayor on behalf of the City of Atlanta to terminate the lease agreement between the City of Atlanta and the Atlanta City Employees Credit Union for office space located at 226 Peachtree Street, consisting of approximately 1,068 square feet of office space, effective as of November 30th, 2022, to enter into a lease termination agreement and for other purposes. I understand that from the administration that we wish to hold this. We need to amend it, but I say we take care of it all next cycle.
I believe so.
Let's just hold it for now, in case there are any other changes that need to come up. So I'll make the motion to hold, seconded by Dozier. Let's open that vote, please.
The vote is open. The vote is closed.
6 yeas, 0 nays, the motion carries. This item will be held. 22-R4777, resolution by Finance Executive Committee authorizing the mayor or his designee to exercise the first renewal option for sole source agreement number listed, IBM Maximo Asset Management Software Subscription and Support Services with International Business Machines Corporation on behalf of the Departments of Watershed Management, Enterprise Asset Management, and Aviation for a term of 1 year, effective from February 1, 2023 through January 31, 2024, in an amount not to exceed $399,299.95. All contracted work will be charged to and paid from the fund department organization and account number listed and for other purposes. Ms. Rackley.
Hello again, Daphne Rackley, Deputy CIO. This is a result of departments combining contracts. They used to have separate Maximo agreements, and so we've combined the agreements now, and this is a renewal option. So Maximo is used primarily for asset and work order management in what we call vertical spaces, so facilities, buildings, which is very different from other asset management that you will hear for our linear assets, like pipes in the ground, things that are long. So it's used extensively there, aviation as well as watershed.
Questions for Ms. Rackley? Love the fact that we're consolidating multiple users. Were we able to get any sort of economies of scale by doing that?
Yeah, a little bit.
A little bit, yeah. We got a
Little
dollar.
bit.
Yeah. All right, other questions for Ms. Rackley? Motion from Shook, second from Winston. Let's open the vote. Nope, East Wing.
The vote is open. The vote is closed.
6 yeas, 0 nays, the motion carries. This item is approved. Thank you. All right, item 25, which is 22-R4778. We do have a substitute, but the caption remains the same. It is a resolution by Finance Executive Committee supplementing a joint task order fund in an amount not to exceed $11,950,000.00 for use under 3 miscellaneous repair and construction services contracts for project numbers listed under $250,000 for ADA and other improvements as contract numbers 1 listed Kisberg Parker Fry JV, 2 number listed Leidy Commercial Construction Inc., and 3 number listed SoCo Contracting Company Inc. to provide for ADA and other improvements on behalf of the Department of Parks and Recreation on a task order basis. All services will be charged to and paid from funding numbers listed herein and for other purposes. The substitute corrects the project account numbers related to CDBG 2020 Motion from Bakhtiari to bring that forward, seconded by Dozier. So let's do that motion and get the substitute before us, please.
The vote is open. The vote's closed.
6 yeas, 0 nays, the motion carries. The substitute is before us. Mr. Dotson.
Good afternoon, Chairman Wan and the FEC committee. My name is Alvin Dotson, Deputy Commissioner, Department of Parks and Recreation. And we have two pieces of legislation before you, but I'll talk about this one here, but it's kind of the same presentation for the next one. We were pleased to receive a little bit over $146 million from the mayor's Moving Atlanta Forward project infrastructure bond. Out of that project, we had 71 funded budgeted projects that were legislated and voted on by the referendum and also codified by this esteemed committee here. What we're asking for today is because we had to deliver a Moving Atlanta Forward strategic plan, and in that plan, we had 5 procurement delivery mechanisms. One of them was the MGC, one was ADA, one was the JOC, one was basically a design-build RFP process, and another one is a hybrid RFP process. So what we're here today is to ask to be able to put funds into these 2 pieces of legislation. The 71 projects are broken down into horizontal and vertical. We have 51 horizontal projects and 20 vertical projects. And just to break that down, the horizontal projects consist of trails, sidewalks, playgrounds, bridges, lighting, different things along those lines. The vertical projects are a little bit more complex. They actually involve building recreation centers and structures and things like that. What we're asking for today in both of these pieces of legislation is we're basically putting $22 million together, where most of it is coming, all but $2 million of it is coming out of the horizontal side, which institutes about 31 or 32 of our projects that we need to provide for. The reason we need to be able to put this into this legislation right now is because everybody's heard about the supply chain issues and different things along those lines. We need to have POs in place, and these are joint task orders that we work with the Department of Procurement with. These are already vetted contracts that we currently have, that we work with these contractors. And once you get the PO, you're still looking at a 6 to 9 month period just to get things like playgrounds or lighting or something as simple as a backflow preventer. So we're here today to ask you to consider this, make sure that we continue with the best interests of the city and moving Atlanta forward with these projects.
And since you mentioned, I'm going to go ahead and read an item 27, and we'll take them together. It's 22R4780, a resolution by Finance Executive Committee supplementing a joint task order fund in an amount not to exceed $17,500,000.00 for use under 2 managing general contractor contracts for project number RFPC 1210031, managing general contractor services as contract numbers. First one listed, Parker Fry, a joint venture. Second one listed, Leidy Soko, a general venture, to provide managing general contractor services for projects at various parks and recreation locations on behalf of the Department of Parks and Recreation on a task order basis. All contracted work will be charged to and paid from the additional accounts listed herein and for other purposes. If these move through, you still remain kind of in terms of sequencing and scheduling the projects, we coordinate that through you, correct?
Oh, definitely. Yes, that happens. All this does is allow the money to be in a procurement mechanism so we could scope this out, and then we get POs from that and we work down off that money per the budgeted legislated amounts that are there.
Do we anticipate using the same vehicle for the other remaining projects as well? It seems like if procurement is on board, is that?
Well, right now, this is roughly 15% of that project. We will utilize it probably again for a little bit more of them, but more of the vertical projects will probably be more of a DB and a JOC and different things along those lines because there are actually long lead construction projects.
Other question for Mr. Dotson. Motion from Shook to approve, seconded by Winston. Councilmember Bakhtiari.
Sorry, just real quick, this can also be on the last paper as well, right? I can ask questions regarding that. So understanding what you said before about horizontal versus vertical. So these projects that are listed here that I'm looking at, the 11 and then also the 21, to be completed in the next 12 months. Is this
Yes.
accurate? So I can now say this to my constituents
Yes, we'll be working very closely with you because, as you know, you have a lot of projects in there. District 5 is
Yes,
represented.
very aware,
Thank you.
as my community likes to remind me of on a daily basis. If anything happens, if there's a hiccup in timeline, I'm giving them Doug's home address, so.
And definitely, and I think part of it, we have to report every 90 days quarterly, so you'll definitely be in lockstep.
I appreciate it, and I will reach out for just a touching base on
Definitely.
projects so that we can,
Definitely.
as well as the park bond. So thank you all for this.
Appreciate it.
A motion from Shook, second from Winston. We're ready. Let's open that vote, please.
The vote is open. The vote is closed.
6 yeas, 0 nays. The motion carries. Those two
Thank
items
you.
are approved. Thank you, Mr. Dotson. Next item, 22-R4779, resolution by Finance Executive Committee authorizing the mayor or his designee to issue task order number listed for contract FC 10641G, job order contracting services small with HCR Construction, Inc. for renovations in the Department of Finance Office of Revenue on behalf of the Department of Enterprise Asset Management in an amount not to exceed $1,188,377.62. All work to be charged to and paid from accounts listed and for other purposes. Mr. Santil.
Greetings again, committee members. Remy Santil, Commissioner, Department of Enterprise Asset Management. This resolution is as stated for the renovations to the Department of Finance.
Questions for Mr. Santil? Motion from Shook, second from Winston. Let's open the vote, please.
The vote is open. The vote is closed.
5 yeas, 0 nays. The motion carries. This item is approved. All right, next item is 22-R4781, a resolution by Finance Executive Committee authorizing the mayor or his designee to execute special procurement agreement number listed E911 caller information system with Carbine, Inc. on behalf of the Department of Atlanta Police Department pursuant to Section 2-1191.1 of the City of Atlanta Code of Ordinances for a term of 5 years with 2 one-year renewal options in an amount not to exceed $1,561,500.00. All contracted work will be charged to and paid from the fund, department, organization, and account number listed herein and for other purposes. We do need to amend this to attach the Department of Procurement certificate. Motion from Dozier to amend, seconded from Winston. The Jason wing. Let's open that vote, please.
The vote is open. The vote is closed.
5 yeas, 0 nays. The motion carries. The amended paper is before us. Ms. Arnold.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Chairman Wan and members of this committee. Carbine Universe is a cloud-based phone system overlay. So if you remember, about a month or so ago, we came forward with Viper 7, which is the actual phone system. So Carbine is an overlay for that phone system, which allows us to become more next generation 911 compliant. So this system will allow us to have live video to 911 streaming. So those people that are out and they're actually in the middle of an incident and they want to share that information with us, they can call us and send that information to us via video. They also have the video uploads directly into our CAD system. And we also have instant messaging, which includes a silent chat feature. So when we have incidents such as an active shooter or a hostage situation or domestic violence incidents, it allows us to silently chat with the person so they don't receive the ping. So it doesn't matter if their phone is on silent or not, they won't receive that messaging that would alert someone that they're actually talking to us. This feature also allows the operator and caller to, hold on, I lost my spot, sorry. It also gives us dynamic mapping system, so to help us with locating callers. So as we continue to host different events, both nationwide, and we host FIFA, for instance, those people that have no absolute idea where they are, this system will put us at least 12 feet of where that person is located. It will allow us to send them a text message. They open the link, and we'll be able to view their camera to get photos, video, and things of that nature. In addition, GDOT already uses this system. And once we move to this platform, we'll be able to share live video. So if something happens from GDOT and spills over into the city and vice versa, we'll be able to communicate that information back and forth. So this is the Carbine Universe system. I do thank you all
for the Viper 7 is doing exactly what we needed it to do. Our call answer time last week was at 9 seconds. So we're just need this technology to help us continue to move forward.
Mr. Arnold, just for the viewing public, if you can just identify yourself and your
I'm
department.
sorry, Director Arnold, Desiree Arnold of Atlanta E911.
All right, questions for Director Arnold. Motion from Shook to approve, seconded by Dozier. I should have said Jason had made them guess. To approve as amended, let's open that vote, please.
The vote is open. The vote is closed.
5 yeas, 0 nays, the motion carries. The item is approved as amended. And thank you for that update on the Viper piece. As I was going through and telling my constituents about it, they understood the notion of non-critical calls being put on hold, and they were. It's good to know that it's working. So, all right, next item. Well, that concludes our resolutions. We're now into dual referred items. The one came out favorably. Actually, they both came out from CDHS, so we'll address them now. The first one is 22R 4708, resolution by council members Bakhtiari, Bond, Winston, Faroki, Amos, Dozier, Wan, Shook, Norwood, Hillis, Boone, Overstreet, Lewis, Westmoreland, and Waits to declare the city of Atlanta as a human rights city and to urge government officials at all levels of government to more fully and effectively implement policies that serve to protect the human rights of all citizens and for other purposes. Came out favorably out of CDHS. Any discussion on this? Motion from the Jasons, motion and second from the Jasons. Y'all can pick.
The vote is open. The vote is closed.
5 yeas, 0 nays, the motion carries. This item is approved. Next item is number 30, 22-01871, an ordinance by council members Overstreet, Bond, Westmoreland, and Waits, authorizing the mayor or his designee to execute an intergovernmental agreement with the Atlanta Development Authority doing business as Invest Atlanta for a term of 5 years with one option to renew for an additional 5-year term in order to effectuate the City of Atlanta's support of Invest Atlanta's grant programs to assist faith-based organizations seeking to develop their land for affordable housing, to support missing middle affordable projects in an amount not to exceed $4,500,000.00, to authorize the chief financial officer or his designee to make the payment to Invest Atlanta, authorized hereby from the Affordable Housing Trust Fund and for other purposes.
Mr. Chair, there was an amended version to add several sponsors to the paper.
Oh, okay. You're right. Here it is. And it adds Winston, Amos, and Hillis. And then I understand we have to substitute it one more time to correct some account code. So I'll make that motion to amend, seconded by Winston. And I actually would like to add my name to this. I don't know if anybody else. And Dozier. So please add Juan and Dozier.
We can do that part of the substitute. Juan, Councilmember Juan, and who else?
Dozier,
Thank you.
Yep. All right. So let's amend. I made the motion to amend, and then we'll add that to the caption as well as bring the substitute forward.
We can make the names as part of the substitute.
Gotcha. Yep. So it was seconded by, who did I say? Oh, it was by the Jasons?
Yeah.
Oh, I got lost there. Motion by the Jason, second by Jason for that one. Amend with the substitute and the names. Let's open the vote, please.
The vote is
We're
open.
so close to the end. It's falling apart.
The vote's closed.
5 yeas, 0 nays, the motion carries. The amended paper is before us. Just one operational question, and CFO Bala, I don't know if you have, I just want to know the disbursement mechanics of this. So we're transferring the funds over. They'll now have treated as a grant program, but what is their authorization and vetting process?
So, hi everyone, Josh Humphreys. Basically, they're going to set up there's going to be 2 programs as part of this. One is $500,000 to do micro grants for faith-based development initiative to support the mayor's program that was launched earlier this year. One of the things that came out of that is need for micro grants. So I think $25,000 or less to do title work and otherwise. So there'll be a application program to get access to those funds. And really the goal of that is to set up for other funding programs that Invest Atlanta has, right? We've got a lot of faith institutions that want to do the work. They're land rich, cash poor, and this will help get them on their way toward being eligible for other programs. So that'll be one side, and there'll be an application process to get access to those funds. The second is $4 million for smaller scale affordable housing grant program. One of the things that's come up, particularly for non-tax credit projects, a lot of larger scale affordable housing projects get tax credits to the state, and that funds a large portion of the affordable housing. The smaller scale projects that are not going for that, and non-traditional affordable housing projects that are having a percentage of affordability that don't do tax credits. There's a real need, especially with construction cost increases, land cost increases, for more programs, particularly grant or low cost, like no cost debt type programs, to help fill the gaps that have risen. So there'll be an application process for that and a vetting to ensure kind of minimum thresholds of affordability, and there's an ROI. So we make sure that as we use the Affordable Housing Trust Fund dollars, they're actually contributing to affordable housing product in the city.
So Councilmember Dozier, you sit on, go through a committee. Like, I know TAD projects go through the TAD committee, but is there something similar and then the full board approves them? Okay.
Staff, committee, and the staff.
Yep.
Oh, thank you. There's finance, there's a number of other committees.
Okay. All right. Very good. As long as there's a good vetting process. Okay. There was a motion and second? No? Let's give it to the Jasons again. It's easy. We're going to write it out with the Jasons. Yeah. There's no.
The vote is open. The vote's closed.
5 yeas, 0 nays. The motion carries. The item is approved as amended. All right, takes us to held papers. We actually have 2 coming off. The first one is item 42, which is 22-01664, an ordinance by Councilmember Alex Wan to provide for the annexation of property located at 923 Springdale Road, Northeast Atlanta, Georgia 30306, into the corporate limits of the city of Atlanta, Georgia, pursuant to the 100% method, to extend the boundaries of the Atlanta Independent School System, to notify the Department of Community Affairs of the state of Georgia of such annexation and for other purposes. This was being held as the companion papers moved their way through. There already motion from Shook to approve, seconded by Wan. Let's open vote.
The vote is open. The vote is closed.
All right, 5 yeas, 0 nays. The motion carries. That item is approved. All right, last item. Oh, we already did it. Item number 48. All right, so that actually concludes our legislative items, correct?
That's correct,
All right.
Mr. Chair.
All right, that takes us to general remarks. Just want to remind everybody that the last committee meeting of the year will be held 2 weeks from now on December 14th. During that meeting, we're going to revisit the 2022 goals and objectives. And then, also the the paper 22-01823. This is the charter amendment for the Office of Ethics being taken out of the Inspector General. I am going to ask Finance as well as Law to review that. There were some other proposed changes and things for us to consider by the OIG and the Inspector General and the board that we'd like to get an opinion on as well. So I'm just asking y'all to do that. If we can have that by the 14th, great. If it needs to spill over, given what all is in there, I just want to make sure it's thorough. Is that all right? Okay. Any other comments or general remarks for the good of the order? All right, seeing none, we stand adjourned. Thank you very much.